Thread, live. A strange incident happened in the house that my husband inherited from his grandmother, who died a few months ago. After the new year, our good friend came to visit us for a couple of days. We live in an apartment, but these couple of days we were thinking about spending the night in the house, grilling shashlik, heating up the sauna, and since we have a dog that requires regular active grazing, the decision came by itself. We met a friend from the train at 12 at night, took meat, a dog, and went out of town, to the house. While talking, eating shashlik and drinking alcohol, we did not notice how morning came. It was about 5, my husband went to sleep on the second floor, and my friend and I sat up late, and somewhere around 6, the dog, who had been running around the house like crazy, flew into the hall where we were sitting, stared at the ceiling and growled dully. My friend and I exchanged glances, and then the dog started barking. My friend's eyes are worth 5 rubles, the dog is baring its teeth and not taking its eyes off the ceiling. There is nothing on the ceiling, no bugs, no spiders, and the dog is crazy. About 10 minutes later the dog calmed down and went on rummaging around the corners, and we spent another half hour trying to figure out what happened. Not a very frosty story, of course, but it is a fact. The dog saw something on the ceiling that was threatening. There are no mice or other living creatures in the house, so it could be attributed to the fact that some animal is scratching at the ceiling lol. In 6 months we are moving into this house, maybe there will be something else to tell. I don't know how creepy it is by paranormal standards, but at that moment I really shit myself. I used to steal newspapers from my mom all the time when I was a school kid. I really loved reading everything from cover to cover. And I read one article in one go. It was some really criminal piece of shit. A drunk guy got wasted on some white stuff and committed local genocide in his own apartment. He killed his little son, who was described in the newspaper way too vividly, like in some classic novel about human nature. I don't know how to explain it, but at that moment I almost cried from the injustice. I felt really sorry for that family, especially the kid. Well, that's it. Mom wasn't home, she went to party hard for the night. I was left alone, played on the computer and felt sleepy. And I really didn't want to unfold the sofa, so I decided to collapse on the narrow surface of the unfolded sofa, without covering myself with anything. I didn't even take a fucking pillow. Well, I barely put my head on the handrail before I passed out. I fell asleep in the dark of night. You can't even pee from anything. My arm was terribly numb, and my brain was indignant, like, why the hell did I wake up, fucking wise guy? So I decided that I needed to go back to sleep, until I heard slap of little steps on the linoleum in the hallway. I mean, I didn't get it. I thought it was the cat, but remembering that I had personally locked him in the toilet, I started to make shit sounds. Slap, that's how little children walk with their little bare feet on a cold floor. Then he came slapping from the hallway to my room. He stopped near the sofa and the spanking stopped. I, lying on a narrow soft space, not even covered with anything, was making such frantic rhythms with my heart, and my breathing was comparable to the breathing of an agonizing infidel whose head was being cut off with a rusty cleaver. It was the most terrible and wild fear I have ever experienced in my life. It is very strange that I quickly passed out after the spanking stopped near my bed, just, fucking, instantly. It was just recently, and not even half a year has passed. You know that chair on wheels, a typical office chair? I have it in my bedroom. There is a lever under the seat that acts as a lift and lower, and without activating it, you can also lift it and hang it down, and it makes a characteristic sound. In general, I think it is already clear that it was slapping at me one night. And not just once, but in bursts with breaks. And the lever is not hanging by snot, a draft cannot just pull it, plus it is not clear how a draft can even reach it behind the seat, plus the window was not even open then, only the door to the room, so that at least there was something to breathe with. Also, in that half of the room there is a mother's bed, but she sleeps in tulle. Also, I have noticed this since childhood, sometimes, if something falls, you can no longer find it. When I was a child, I took the talisman from a sanatorium. I took great care of it. I didn't even wear it. It was in a transparent bag with Velcro along with other small change. I come home, see that it is in a bag. I dump the contents on the table. Out of the corner of my eye I see the characteristic bright blue color flashing, and as a result, it is not on the table among all the crap. And nothing rolled off the table, and even if it had rolled away, the perimeter would have been dug up, nothing. The other day it happened again, a hairpin fell. Only I didn't move the closet, nowhere, bitch, as if someone stole it. I bet that it is me who is poking holes in the eyes, but I still believe in the ghost. I spent my entire childhood in a communal apartment. Once I had a dream in which I killed my neighbor granny in the toilet, lol. Well, I told my mom, we laughed. A month later someone sat in the toilet for too long, not answering the knock. Well, my dad broke down the door, and there this granny was lying dead. Then we moved to a new apartment, did more or less decent repairs for those times and invited relatives to the housewarming. Among the relatives was my 5-year-old cousin. When she entered the nursery, she started crying and constantly repeated that she would never have such a house, never never never. Well, we didn't understand then what had gotten into the child. I just remember this unpleasant episode. When she turned 7, she asked her parents to buy her an angel costume with wings. They didn't find any and bought her butterfly wings. Then she had a dream in which a crowd of children were going somewhere, and she was stopped and not allowed to go further. She was not baptized, but how could a child of 7 know that? She died before she turned 8. It turns out she was right about the house. In the 8th grade, she got angry at a jerk from the parallel class, and together with a goth classmate, they made a wax figure of him and ceremoniously tore off his head. The next day, it turned out that he had broken his neck that night. I understand that all of these are coincidences, but they are somehow painfully creepy. I constantly see prophetic dreams. Well, constantly. If I saw something in a dream, it will come true with a 100% guarantee in a year or two. The dreams are very vivid, detailed, somewhat similar to how OS are described, short and etched in the memory. Moreover, both some insignificant bullshit and rather important events in life can be dreamed of. In this regard, complete randomness. And I also saw my death in a dream, Anon. Shortly before meeting my mother, my dad served in Afghanistan. And he brought back from there a ceramic face, a devil's mask. Black and very detailed, lovingly made. He hung this shaitan over his bed and called it his talisman. As a child, I repeatedly watched how blurry semi-transparent silhouettes fly out of this devil. My younger sister saw them too, by the way. Later, my parents got divorced, my dad left and soon died of a banal pneumonia, and the devil was thrown on the mezzanine. Already in grade 11, I found it, washed it, and hung it in its original place. Actually, since then I started having dreams. Here. The devil was sold to some crazy collector about 10 years ago, but I still remember it. In 2012, my girlfriend and I observed a UFO, but it was more funny than creepy. That's how it is. In short, I live alone. The other day before going to bed I undressed and put the tights I wear around the house on the side of the sofa. I always do that. I had a creepy dream last night, woke up, it was about 3 a.m, went to take a pee and glanced at the side, my pants were not there. I thought they fell, looked behind the sofa, they were not there. I got mad, turned on the light, looked under the sofa, my tights were nowhere to be found. I felt scared. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, turned off the stove, sat at it, checked fake contact. Again I looked for my pants. Well, they were nowhere to be found. No one could have stolen them from me, I live alone. By 5 o'clock I felt sleepy. In 2 hours I need to get ready for a redneck job. I forgot about the missing pants, went to bed. I wake up at 7 a.m. to my alarm clock. I look at the side of the sofa and my tights are neatly folded on it. And then, fuck, I got hooked on cheating. My stomach started to churn. I ran to take a crap on the toilet. This is not some sleepy paralysis or schizophrenia. At least from 3 to 5 a.m., my pants disappeared from my hut or were very skillfully hidden in it. This happened on the night from Thursday to Friday, January 15th. And for a week now, every night before going to bed, I check for pants on the side, but so far everything is quiet. The next day after this fucked up thing, I called my parents and told them this story, but I don't think they believed me. I'm sure it's him trolling me. Has anyone had this happen, that things that you 100% know where you put them disappear, and then return to the same place? Sap, Anon, I don't believe in creepiness, but nevertheless, recently some events happened on the topic of the thread. I moved to another city to a rented apartment. I live there with a chick. In the other room lives a familiar couple. Well, before the move we rented a 2-room apartment with them for 6 months, and all 4 of us decided to move. And so, after some time, that couple decided that their room was cursed, and here's why. 1. Before the move, they lived in perfect harmony for a long time, but after the move, they started having some kind of nerves and quarrels out of the blue, and they themselves are shocked by the idiotic reasons for these quarrels. 2. Some problems started with everything in a row, with documents, with work, although they both have experience, and the husband is generally a professional in his field. The nature of the problems is such that as soon as something has settled down and it seems that it has become good, that same evening some kind of fucked up thing happens. The last time, one of our neighbors tripped and twisted her knee out of nowhere in the room, badly. 3. My girlfriend and I mostly stay in our room and live in perfect harmony. But a couple of times we decided to watch the trash TV in their room for some reason, when they weren't home, and both times we argued over absolutely nothing, and we are both calm, balanced people with no complaints about each other. 4. Well, and the best part, they once found a fucking scattering of needles on the closet. So now everyone except me thinks that it's a conspiracy. The room is damned. Even my girlfriend is starting to believe it a little. Also, that room is more trump card than ours, but no one lays claim to ours, so that's hardly the issue. I won't write the details to avoid a diving in. I know that before us, some Barriots lived in the apartment and really smashed the furniture and bathroom. I already wrote here once, not a creepy story, but just an unusual one. In short, it was around the year 96 to 97, in the summer, in one of the villages of the Altai region. I was 11 to 12 years old, went with a neighbor of about 40, for mushrooms in the area. We drove quite far, 20 kilometers from the village. He told Maine that he had never been there in his life, and there was no road. We were just riding through a field on a motorcycle. A forest appeared in front of us, not large but very dense. It smelled damp and the sun did not break through the crowns of the trees. And so, making our way through the thicket in search of mushrooms, we came across stone blocks overgrown with moss. Several of them stood in a row. On a couple of them we managed to see the letters knocked out. We couldn't make out what was written. The neighbor said that it was a gypsy cemetery. He most likely lied, because no one lived there before the Virgin Lands. These lands were developed only in the 50s to 60s of the 20th century. And the stones were much older. And so next summer I plan to go there and find this place. These are like tombstones, only with symbols instead of crosses. I talked to the locals. No one has ever heard of or seen one. Although it is only 20 km from the village. Sap. First. I'll write my own cool one. I didn't sleep again last night, because I'd messed up my sleep schedule a long time ago. Towards morning, when it was already quite light, I felt like going to drink some water. I go into the kitchen and see, in the center there's an eye hanging at my height, and it's looking at me. For some reason at that moment I didn't really give a shit. I went to the sink, had a drink, and was heading back. And then, on the threshold, it struck me like an electric shock. Human bitch eye in my kitchen. I dropped a brick, hurt my fingers. I'm standing there, looking at it. I don't know how long, but it feels like a long time. I automatically ran my hand over it, and there was no fucking thread there. This shit was just hanging in the air. I dropped a second brick. I thought I'd fallen asleep unnoticed, so I pinched my arm. Nothing had changed. And then the corners of my eyes started to get dark, as if I was starting to fall asleep. Somewhere in the distance a thought flashed that if I turn off now I will never turn on. And then I fucking did something that God knows how came into my head. I just reached out and crushed that fucking eye in my fist. And at that moment my fucking left eye bursted, with wild pain, but the darkness from the edges of my vision disappeared. And then I woke up with a sharp scream. And you know, Anon, I would have simply written it off as a nightmare, if not for 3 buts. 1. I woke up in the kitchen. 2. My eye hurt like hell, but luckily it was in place, it just felt like someone pressed really fucking hard on it. 3. There was a small amount of blood on my palm. Anons, who has encountered such bullshit? P.S. I apologize for the uneven handwriting, it still shakes. I have come across stories about the Shadow Man quite often. And the first time I heard about him was not on the internet. One of my acquaintances, let's call her Nadia, told me how one day her friend called her and asked her to come over. She was crying and begging her to come right now, immediately. When Nadia arrived, she found her friend hysterical. She told her the following story: she was sitting on the couch, watching TV, when suddenly she heard a loud hissing from the door. Looking there, she saw a large shadow man in the doorway, looking at her and hissing loudly. Horrified, the girl jumped up, slammed the door in front of him, and locked it with the latch, and began to hold it. She heard someone hitting the door hard and hissing. Crying with horror, she called Nadia and asked her to come over. The girls spent the whole night with the light on. Nadia said that nothing happened, but there was a heavy atmosphere in the apartment, as if something was constantly pressing on them. The second time I heard about the man was from another friend of mine. Let's call her Katya. She was living in a dorm at the time. One day she had a bad dream. In this dream, she saw a tall black figure enter their room. This figure approached her roommate's bed and leaned over her. There was a sound, as if someone was forcefully sucking in air. The friend tried to scream, but her whole body seemed to be squeezed in a vice from horror. Suddenly, the man turned around sharply and looked at her with big red eyes. Then Katya woke up. The friend woke up with her. And then the friend began to tell Katya that she had a nightmare, as if a black man with red eyes entered the room and leaned over her. I was surprised that 2 strangers had such similar stories, and I started looking for information on the internet. It turns out that quite a lot of people have encountered a similar phenomenon. True, the descriptions of the black man differ somewhat. Some say he is tall, others say he is average. His eyes are sometimes red, sometimes yellow, sometimes blue. Sometimes he hisses, sometimes not. But otherwise, everything is similar: impenetrable blackness and a feeling of horror at the sight of him. There is an assumption that these are some kind of infernal entities that feed on human fear. They are harmless in themselves, but their appearance and presence causes an animal horror in a person, which is very difficult to overcome. However, there is an easy way to drive away the black man. You need to try to grab him with a loud curse. I think the curse is needed in order to overcome the numbness that the ghost causes with its presence. Since they are products of the subtle world, contact with the physical body is destructive for them, so if you grab them, they will immediately disappear. Of course, there may be a more prosaic explanation. Most witnesses saw him after sleeping, and the description of numbness and dumbness strongly resembles banal sleep paralysis. However, in the first story, Nadia's friend was not sleeping. And in Katya's case, both girls saw the black man, which is also not typical for sleep paralysis. I have never encountered such a phenomenon directly, and I have never seen a CC with my own eyes. However, I remember how I once woke up at night from a loud hissing sound. I felt very afraid, I could not move, and only heard a sound at the head of my bed, as if someone was inhaling air with force. It was very scary. Then some instinct kicked in, and I said, "Get the fuck out of here," overcoming my weakness, and waved my hand in the direction of the hissing. Then I woke up completely, regained the ability to move. The room was quiet, only the clock was ticking loudly. And I saw that with the swing I had hit my army knife, which I usually keep on a chair at the head of my bed. In general, I'm writing stories. I have some. Once I got drunk with one of my friends in all sorts of cafes and vomit. We were celebrating something, in short. And so, in one cafe we got drunk, and the cafe was fucking weird, like an old pie shop, and they served beer and there was still a TV, I remember. In general, we got drunk and then some shady guy sat down next to us. In general, I can't stand this, but among the older generation, apparently, this is the norm. Alcoholics probably make friends like this. Well, he started guzzling our booze. We are not greedy people, especially since this vomit was extremely cheap. We got 100 for 6 rubles. Well, so, he told us all his stories about life, and then said that he was Satan. And he started telling us some kind of nonsense. But I already realized that he was an asshole and started telling him to fuck off. He got pissed. I quietly spun the salt shaker and decided to sprinkle it in his eyes if he started swinging. But he backed out and promised to wait for me outside. But I was sitting with my back to the window drinking beer and was too lazy to go out. Then my friend pushed me and said, "Look, he's making obscene gestures out the window." So I jumped up and ran to give him a beating for that, but he disappeared into thin air. So I went back and sat in the cafe until the morning. And then a little later, I remembered the story, went to that area to catch Satan at that pub and punch him, but I couldn't find either the cafe or those houses in that place. I crawled around the whole area and nothing like that. I called that friend and said, "Did you and Satona happen to be drinking together in such and such an area?" He was like, "Yeah, we were drinking, I remember that stick bundle." He even showed us the finger through the glass, and I didn't tell him that. Anyway, I told him that there was nothing like that there. We went together and didn't find anything. Tram tracks leading to a parking lot and some wasteland with trees. Who knows, maybe we both have a false memory. One day I was walking past an abandoned hospital and a drunk stick bundle came up to me and complained that someone had taken her rightful bottle of champagne. Like, she was carrying the bottle in her hands, to catch up with her bastard friends at their place, and some random guy snatched it out of her hands and kicked her in the ass. Well, I'm kind and say, "So where?" And she points to the abandoned building. Well, I'm not stupid. I immediately realized that there would most likely be some kind of ambush, or a creepy story, and went. It was very interesting. And I decided to whip the little slut right when the brawl started, so that all the desire of the Gopita to work as bait would disappear. And nothing of the sort. We rummaged around these shitty corridors and found 2 assholes and an open bottle of shampoo, which the police usually like to squeeze suspects with. Well, I told them to give the bottle back and gave one of them a kick. Well, hello. They gave it back. Anyway, while we were getting back, the stick bundle slammed the bottle into her face herself. I hope her bastard friends didn't kill her at her place and ate her for lack of alcohol. In general, young people born before 1991 are strange salt shit. 1 day my friend and I went into the forest and found a raspberry bush, most likely it was a house planting, because there was a burnt house nearby. Bumblebees were buzzing, the sun was languidly roasting, and we were picking these fucking raspberries, and then it seemed to me that someone called out to me from the house. I thought it was my friend and went there, but then I saw her standing to the right of me. Well, I got scared and told her this briefly, picked up a few stones and started throwing them at the house and shouted, "Get out, F***ck." And she grabbed my hand and pulled, shouting, "Let's run." Well, we ran and so onto the railway embankment, and then along it. Then we stopped. I asked, "Why did you run?" She said that she was afraid that they would shoot at us. Of course, I called her a pussy, but I noted that she was an extremely logical girl. We overcame our fear and filled the second half of the bucket with blackberries growing right next to the tracks. It was unsettling. In general, such places' ashes are scary to the point of irrationality. Well, yes, this is self-pumping. For once my friend and I were walking through a wasteland. It was already evening, hummocks, some kind of bullshit like sedge or reeds growing, and silence. And then I accidentally turn around and see a man running behind us in zigzags. Well, I tell my buddy, "Don't ask anything, it seems like shit, just trust me, lol, such bullshit I came up with." Well, my friend believed me and we ran, but I run badly, my side starts to prick and my lungs are burning. The guy is already breathing down our necks and running in a straight line after us, like a bloodthirsty bitch. I'm out of breath and shouting to my friend, "We're not running, we're fucking beating him up." Well, we beat him up and ran again. He's some kind of psycho, or a maniac, or he really wanted to smoke. And it can be very unpleasant to walk in a dead forest. You just want to run, and the dead trees creak. And it's also unpleasant when you meet a person in the forest and you need to talk to him, and he tells you that he's out for a walk, yeah, without a basket and other mushroom picking and hunting gear. You usually watch such a person for a long time and then speed up your pace. But I'm tired of typing. In my life I remember 2 cases. First, back in the bearded year of 2007, my friends and I were walking around the dacha and noticed that at the beginning of the street, about 200 meters, the dachas were parallel alleys. There was some strange thing, from a distance resembling a blurry figure. There was no street light there, and despite the fact that it was late, about 10 o'clock in the evening, it was quite dark, but the silhouette was clearly visible. We got curious and I, with 2 friends, there were 7 of us in total, went to check it out on our bikes. After riding 30 meters, we were only convinced that it was fucking creepy and inexplicable and fucked off back to our own. Maybe Anon will help and put forward an adequate theory about what it was. Second case, it literally happened the following spring, when I was at a training camp with my football team and lived in an old hotel. That day after the games, in the evening, as always, we were running around the area and having fun. We found women's shoes in different places and a woman's bag. At the time, it seemed strange to us, our imagination was playing tricks on us. A little later, a guy's phone went missing. We looked for it for a long time and eventually it was found where, according to this guy, he hadn't used it. We found it on the roof of some abandoned building when we went there to play catch. By that time, our imaginations were going crazy and we were already scared to sleep. So we all gathered in the largest room, where about 6 guys lived, and pushing the beds together, We lay down in a crowd. Everything was fine until one idiot threw up. The coach came and dispersed us. That's when this shit happened. My bed was perpendicular to the front door. I was lying on my side and looking at the lampshade. It was hanging above the front door to the room. And then I see how it seems like they are taking it off, lifting it up a little and pulling it towards themselves. It fell and broke. We were just fucking shit ourselves then. I'll say right away, it didn't look like a normal fall of a poorly secured thing. Also, my parents told me that there was such a case. When I was still a very little brat, about a year old, we went to a village for someone's birthday. There at some point I started to sob and scream wildly, and my temperature also rose. They took me to a rural hospital. A young doctor told me to take me to an old woman in a neighboring village, because it was the evil eye. Anyway, they took me to her, she read prayers and everything went away. I calmed down. In conclusion, I would like to say that I am a skeptic. I do not believe in the paranormal and all sorts of psychics, but I cannot explain these cases. A couple of years ago, my friend and I were driving through our backwater. We stopped at an intersection and were waiting for the light to turn green. There was a road in front of us, a square to the right, and a 12-story building to the left. Suddenly, as I was looking at it, I noticed an object hovering to the right of the 12-story building, a little behind, at the level of the 10th floor. It was shaped like a plate or a cigar, who knows? Just a moment. But it was clear. I looked back and saw nothing. I am a skeptic to the core, and I immediately started looking in my head for the most likely reasons. I decided that I imagined it, and my imagination did its job and completed the picture for me. I kept looking closely at that place. And then my friend said, "Did you see it too?" It turns out that he saw it too. He said that this thing seemed to appear there for a moment and then disappeared. I am still searching in my mind for the most plausible explanation. I put the UFO idea on the farthest shelf. I almost deny it. Perhaps I will cause indignation and laughter, anon, because now we will talk about Minecraft. But I will not talk about Herobrine and strange changing file sizes, but about multiplayer. And I do not know how to tell, especially since the story is more strange than scary. It happened in early 2012, if my memory serves me right. Back then, 1.1 and 1.2 were popular. I even found servers for 1.0.0 somewhere. I also remember that at that time there was a popular unofficial version of some beta, on which they even installed servers, but I do not pay much attention to unofficial creations. So, I played the latest version on one small and typical server. Its name began with the letter E, some beautiful Latin or pseudo-Latin word, similar to equilibrium, of which there are millions. If there are any Kubakers here, then you probably know what it is, a shitty spawn, or rather, not the spawn itself, but what is around it within 1000 blocks, hermits leaving even with the possibility of private for 15k from the spawn, hard to get some basic resources, because all the animals were killed, and all the trees were cut down. I was just a hermit who went as far as possible, even considering the fact that I can private my house. Okay, that's it, not really necessary details. I just started playing on the server and managed to go beyond 8,000 blocks. Although I planned to go beyond 10,000, at the distance that I went, there was a pretty beautiful place for construction, so I decided to build there and there. Having built a house on the place I reached and having settled in there, I started moving to the second one and dragged things from one to the other. I don't know what kind of policy is followed on servers like this, but there are servers where /thome and /home are fucking forbidden by the rules and don't work. Fuck, why the hell would you even install them if they're forbidden, assholes? Not all the things, just some. Because of the not very convenient route, my path ran right through the border of the forest and the steppe. At that very moment, it seemed to me from the forest that there was some village in the steppe. I thought it was an NPC village and decided to go in to get some goodies from there, or at least take what the previous players had not taken. When I got closer, it turned out that it was not an NPC village, but a player village. Even at that moment, when I saw it better, I realized that something was wrong with it. These were 8 houses of the same architecture. They were boxes, but made with taste, that is, there were some strokes that decorated them. The houses were made of cobblestone, but the decorations could have been made of other materials. Behind the houses there were vegetable gardens surrounded by a fence. The houses stood near a sand road that was 2 cubes wide, located opposite each other. The road itself was built in a zigzag. Near one end of the road there was a small pyramid that was 2 cubes high. I was surprised, firstly, that the players were building with the same architecture, and this is not often seen. Usually everyone likes to build differently, and secondly, they were building in a slightly strange order. However, at that time I did not notice all the oddities that were with this village, although later I went into it twice and passed by once. A year later, when I left the server, I began to remember other things that I did not pay attention to from the very beginning, some of them because I did not have enough experience playing multiplayer back then. 1. Lighting. There was none. There were not even banal torches inside the houses. And I understand in rooms with windows, but even in the mines nearby there were no torches. 2. Nothing was locked in the village. Except for that shitty pyramid I was talking about. This is despite the fact that the chests of the villagers had diamonds, iron, and gold, valuable resources, in a word. But the only private one is on the pyramid. Are they really that naive to think that they won't be found? Or don't they feel sorry for the resources? 3. There was no one in the village. No matter how many times I saw or entered this village, there was not a single player there. Even that time, when there was rush hour on the server, the village was empty. At first, considering point 1, I thought that the village was abandoned. But why the hell didn't they take the resources? And point 4. However, as it turned out later, someone lived in the village anyway. They collected the grown wheat in the gardens, sowed new seeds. The wheat that was collected was added to the chests, and other resources were updated there. The very last time I entered the village, the pyramid had been moved to the other end of the road. 5. By the way, about the pyramid. Its lower part, 3x3 blocks, was made of wood, and the upper block, of iron. Why is that? Who the hell knows? I was never able to find out the purpose of the pyramid. There weren't even any rituals performed around it. 6. Judging by the number of houses, about 8 people could live there. Why not make something grandiose in that case? Usually, when someone builds together on a server, people make something cool, like a metro. Here, there was nothing except a small pyramid. 7. The interior. Each house had an absolutely identical interior. They were not only the same externally, no, they were even made from the same carbon copy inside. 8. And finally, the last point. The previous points can also be attributed to the fucking cheaters. But this is just some kind of fucked up mess. There were no beds. There were no beds on a server where /Sthome is banned, Carl. Do they come here all over again every time they die? Are they fucking crazy? You know, Anon, I'm still tormented by this question. This is such a wild life, but what is all this for? What made these 8 people play so hard? Maybe in their souls they are some kind of beasts who can only live by beast laws? Or were they fanatics? Who are the people who built this village? My great-grandmother lives in a remote village. They think she's a witch. So, 3 years ago, she charmed me away from smoking and drinking. It happened like this. I was staying with her on vacation, and I said that I couldn't quit smoking. She offered to help, and for that I needed to perform a simple ritual. So, the knight told me to go to the pond where everyone was being chased and ask the water spirit to help me quit my bad habits, and to take a shot glass and a cigarette with me. Then I went into the water with these items, dived in and came up without them. In short, I did everything right. It was strange that when I dived, some fish or seaweed slid across my body. Well, after that, I threw up from the vodka and cigarettes. Something similar happened. About 2 years ago I started having problems with urination. I could hardly pee, even if I really needed to go to the toilet. I would stand in the toilet for 20 to 30 minutes and try to pee, straining, or, on the contrary, relaxing. Sometimes it worked, but not always. I went to the doctor. He said that I needed to go to the hospital for an examination. I decided to do so, but not right away. At first I decided that I would go home, collect my things there and all that. When I was at home, my parents suggested that I go to an old woman who many people come to, even from other countries, a famous healer, in short. We went. I told her about my problems. She told me to lie down on the couch, and then she began to press on my pubic area. She pressed hard. It was very painful. But, that same day I began to go to the toilet normally and still have no problems with urination. I don't know how to explain this. I usually always sleep with earplugs and have already gotten used to it. And yesterday at 1 in the morning I went to bed as usual and plugged in music in my headphones to calm my brain, so to speak. When I started to fall asleep, I took out the headphones and plugged in the earplugs, which I put on the floor. After some time, I woke up and discovered that the earplugs were not in my ears, but were lying on the floor, together and exactly as if someone had put them. I had thoughts that I could have entered the astral plane, lol, so I plugged in the earplugs and passed out. Hi Anon. This is my first time writing. I usually read and look at pictures. But then I came across a thread about Goatman and remembered something my buddy told me about 10 years ago. I'm writing here because according to my buddy, this is a true story. He has relatives in the village, and one time he went there. They were walking along a country road at night, and to the left or right there were tall thickets, corn or hogweed, I don't remember anymore. And supposedly half a man, half a goat, hooves, horns, and all, ran out of the bushes. His arms were folded at his sides, and he chased after them with a furious howl. They shit themselves and ran without looking back until they were exhausted. When their strength ran out, they turned around. No one was there. My buddy wasn't known as a bullshitter, and he told the story in such a way that it seemed true. Well, Anon, you know that feeling yourself. The story was forgotten then, but now I remembered it. I'm waiting for your versions or links/quotes about wood goblins/domovoi and other interesting personalities. Dad spent his entire childhood in Siberia, in a small village next to a young coniferous forest. One day he went with his grandfather to pick mushrooms in this forest. They separated. Dad walks, looks under his feet, suddenly notices that the young light forest with the chirping of birds has been replaced by gloomy tall pine trees, because of which the sky is almost invisible. And the whole earth is in huge mushrooms, the size of a man's head. He tore off a piece of this mushroom and ran back, because he was afraid that he would get lost. He runs to his grandfather. Look, what huge mushrooms are in the old forest. Grandfather is surprised. What kind of old forest? Here in a radius of 10 kilometers there are only small fir trees. Dad took him in the direction from which he ran, and there is still the same young light forest. He climbed a tree, looked around. No 100-year-old pines are really visible anywhere nearby. He only had a piece of mushroom left as proof, and even that was thrown away because it turned out to be wormy. Fuck, I just got chills when I read your story. It was about a month and a half ago. I had already turned off the light, it was night, I was lying on the bed and listening to music. I was waving my arms to the rhythm, singing along a little LOL, I just loved doing that, and then my gaze stopped at the edge of the bed. There was a fucking incomprehensible black shit in the form of a vertical ellipse 1 meter high looking right at me. While I was staring at it in a daze, I literally started spinning and being pulled in there visually, not physically, as if I was falling into this black hole. Thinking that I was going to fall off the fucking way, having managed to grab a pillow and cover myself with it, then I lay there for 10 minutes covered in sweat until I reached for my phone and calmed down. I also saw some gray colors in the center, who knows what it was, but it was definitely not sleep paralysis, because I was able to move. Once upon a time, when I was still a Sosnetsky, my parents sent me to vacation on Lake Baikal. Okhan Island, to be more specific. We lived in summer houses, went on various excursions, rode horses. And then one day we went on a horseback riding trip with an overnight stay. Galloping through the forest on a horse is not much fun. In the evening, we set up camp in a clearing by the stream and began to have a cool drink by the fire. A groom, a local resident, was sitting with us, and when the stories about the coffin on wheels ended, he began to tell how he was sailing on a boat to fish and their nets broke. The funny thing is that the water in Baikal is very clean and transparent, you can see 30 to 40 meters deep, and where they were sailing, the depth was almost a kilometer, there was nothing to catch the nets on. And according to him, it jerked so much that the boat rocked. I later spoke to local fishermen, they confirmed that yes, this happens, and in deep places, many nets have been lost like that. I also told a cool story. In one village in August, a boy went missing, he went for a walk and never came back. The parents panicked, first they searched with the villagers, then the Ministry of Emergency Situations and soldiers got involved, they dug up the entire island, not a trace of the boy was found. A year later, one of the neighbors met this boy in the forest near the village and took him to his parents. What is characteristic, he was wearing the same clothes as on the day he left, and they were clean and not torn. When asked where he had been all this time, he answered, with his grandfather. He remained silent to other questions. The boy's only grandfather died a month before the boy went missing, he was very sad about it. But when I pass by the closet, I clearly hear something scratching against the door inside. And I'm clearly not asleep at the time, lol. And I'm not crazy, because my guests/relatives hear it, too, without exception. I open the closet, yes. There's nothing like that inside, and when I open it, the sound disappears. I thought it was a mouse, so I checked. It turned out that it wasn't. And when you pass by, it's unlikely that a mouse can scratch the door from the inside at the level of a human head. I'm used to it, actually. The only thing that has been added recently is that if you stop and stand near the closet for a minute, the scratching turns into a steady knock on the door from the inside. It's so quiet, and as if someone is clapping a hand. That's how it is. Also, we tried to get one. 3 different cats, having lived in the apartment for a couple of days, ran away like a bullet when the front door was opened and did not want to come back. I had to take it to the dacha, there's a cat farm there now, lol. Anons, I remember the same thing happened to me. I was about 8 to 9 years old, I decided to take a leak at night. I remember I did my business, I go back to the room, and in order to get to the room, I had to go through my parents' room straight to mine, since the family was not rich, they slept in the living room and I was in the far room. So I go back through the doorway to my room, step over the threshold and suddenly a bright blue screaming face appears in front of me. So I have never taken a shit, the screeching in my ears still makes me shiver. Please note that all this happened, you could say, in my parents' room, but apart from me, it seems no one heard the screeching. Then a lapse in memory and I woke up on the floor, My heart was beating very fast and I ran to my bed and wrapped myself in a blanket, fell asleep in the morning. Or rather, it was creepy. I don't know if I'm in the right place, but anyway, it was the summer of 2012, I was preparing to take a physics exam in the 9th grade, and one day, returning from another consultation, some drunk guy pestered me on the street asking for a light. After I gave him a cigarette and a box of matches, he took a 10-ruble coin out of his pocket and gave it to me for luck, telling me not to spend it. After that, I successfully passed the exam, pulling out the only ticket I knew and, tossing a coin, guessed the outcome of about 3 matches at the European Football Championship. And then my mom gave this coin to my English tutor. That's how things are. KKHKH, I'm not sure it's scary, but I want to share. It all started about 5 years ago, when I was studying in Spain. We had a granny there, deeply religious. And one day they sent me to her kitchen for salt. I come in, all kind and sweet, call my granny, and then salt flies at me. Literally. From my granny. And the granny herself points her finger at me and talks some nonsense in Spanish, from which I only understood that she thinks I'm the devil. Oh well, I think, maybe because I'm a redhead. Who can understand their old people? Everything would have been fine, and I wouldn't have bothered if the day before we hadn't summoned some Spanish crap, and the scapegoat, i.e. the victim into whom the spirit was supposed to move, was, as always, me. By the way, precisely because of the color of my hair, I don't know why. Well, they screwed up the ritual, did everything, but the only thing is, for some reason after the ritual I passed out. Well, I don't remember anything more precisely. And in general, it seems they succeeded. After 3 years and a bit, cats began to love me, other animals began to pathologically dislike me, and religious grandmothers began to fear me. I, in turn, began to dislike churches, and a lot of other crap. Honestly, I don't know what kind of crap this is, and I'm just sharing. Oh, I'll tell you a story, it happened last year. My friends and I decided to go fishing to the river for a few days. One of them had a dacha nearby, and the river itself was in a nature reserve about 15 kilometers from civilization. The place was wilderness and wild, no people, nature, animals. By the way, we had a great time fishing, we even caught a couple of sterlets weighing about 1.5 kilograms. So, somewhere on the second evening, fishing, as usual, smoothly turned into drinking, and drinking, into eating shit. As a non-drinker, I sat quietly on the sidelines at first, and then just decided to leave, so as not to spoil people's holiday with my sober face. Well, I decided to go into the forest, stupid, of course, but then I didn't think of something. I'm walking, taking a stroll. Well, I'm walking, sometimes a normal path, sometimes I'm crossing through thickets. Luckily I have a good flashlight and a tourist GPS with me. Without it, you'll get lost even in 500 meters during the day. It dawned on me later, or rather, later a local friend explained it clearly, that the paths there are trampled by animals, mostly wolves and wild boars. There are no people there at all, except for foresters, and even those, 3 for all 200 square kilometers. I'm walking, rustling from the side, shining the flashlight, a hedgehog. Or eyes in the dark, making the beam narrower, shrugged to the side, a fox, only a tail flashed. I'm walking along the path, suddenly I see a light. I come closer, some old woman is standing, twirling a barely glowing flashlight in her hands, leaning on a stick with her other hand. I said hello and wanted to pass by. And she says, "Son, can you help me get home, or you'll see what a disappointment it is," and she points to the flashlight. "The road is uneven, you never know, I might trip and fall. It's not far from here, I'll show you the way." Don't refuse an old granny, and she grabs me by the elbow. We walk on, but I can't come to my senses. Suddenly I look, there's a fence ahead, a wattle fence, made of wood, slanted, all in moss, and behind it, some kind of hut, also all walls and a roof green from moss, slanted, no windows, only a door on the side. On the fence, on the posts, there are cracked pots hanging, also overgrown with moss in places, a slightly open slanted gate. And the old lady seemed to have more strength. Here we are, I'll boil the samovar now, we'll drink some tea, wash up, and I'll put you to bed. Your friends have been asleep for a long time, why are you walking through the forest at night? And she drags me by the elbow, squeezed it so hard that it hurt. I felt so scared. We approach the gate, I look, and it has grown into the ground, really well grown, apparently, there is grass around. The old lady, oh, I need to fix it, and tries to open it with both hands. I look behind the gate, and the path from the house seems to be slightly glowing. I felt really unwell, I took my feet and ran. Oh, I've never run like that before. Without a compass, without a navigator, in about 20 minutes straight to the camp in one breath. And there, yes, those guys got drunk and are sleeping. I sat all night and kept the fire brighter. And around there is a dark forest, rustling sounds, and beyond the circle from the fire there is impenetrable darkness. Okay, let's go. We walk for about 10 minutes, the granny keeps saying what a good girl I am, that she went to the village for groceries, and she herself is without a bag and completely light, but then she sits for too long, the flashlight died, and is talking other nonsense. And she drags me by the elbow. Suddenly, from the side, it's as if someone is breaking through the bowl, and a boar comes out onto the path, about 10 meters away. Black, healthy and with yellow tusks. It's scary, terrifying. I stand still and can't move or budge. And the old woman raises her stick at him and yells, "Get out of here, you bastard, don't scare me, you see the man is afraid of you, go, go." The boar looked at us, and ran away from where he came from. The next day, I told a local, in general terms, how it all happened. He said that I was an idiot for going into the forest, because wild boars and wolves will eat you and say thank you. They won't stick their noses into the camp near the fire, and in the forest, that's the only way they can, a nature reserve, the animals have no fear. And about the granny, well, I dreamed it in the fresh air because I'm not used to it. The nearest village is 15 kilometers away, that's where we were walking. And there's no housing closer. And then he added that people gossip. The places are remote. And sometimes people disappear. 2 years ago they were looking for a tourist, but they decided that he drowned in a swamp out of stupidity. That's how it is, Anons. I still think that I wouldn't be sitting here with you if I had gone into that hovel. When I was a kid, we had a human skull behind the curtain in our parenting room. Well, I didn't really give a shit, a skull is just a skull. A little while later, I decided to check if it was real or not, so I went in when no one was there. I knock on it, it felt like a bone, quite heavy, well, I was fucking shocked, in short. In the evening, my dad comes in, I say, "What's a real human skull doing there?" He says, "What are you fucking nuts?" We go in together, no fucking way. Fuck, I say, I've been watching it here all the time, and my dad says, "You're a moron, what the hell are you talking about?" I somehow forgot about it later, and then I started seeing the skull in my room. I had the same curtains on the window. At night, I fall asleep, look out the window, there's a skull behind the curtain. And I had a nightmare once, that this skull was eating me at night. Well, I thought, fuck, I'll throw it out now. I go to the window, it's fucking gone. I went to my mom, I said, "I see skulls, I sleep shitty." Well, she took it all really fucking seriously, called her friend, she advised me to take me to some granny. So, on the weekend we went to this granny, she lived in some village near our backwater. We went to her place, and there was a characteristic smell, as if some herbs were being burned, something nasty was being cooked. Well, the granny looked at me, said, like, "The devils are bothering you." Just like that, right from the doorway, we didn't even say hello. Well, she said, "Now we're going to chase the devils away from you." And I look around, and she has icons hanging, only all upside down, fucking hell. I look at my mom, and she doesn't give a shit. So I'm so quiet, and she walks around me, waving some bunch of grass, muttering something, then says to my mom, "No, like, go out into the yard, I need to concentrate." Then, when we're alone, she says to me, "The devils are scaring you with death, feeding on your young fears." Now she says, "I have some charmed water, just for such an occasion." And then she farted. I was deafened by the sound, and such a caustic fart that my eyes fucking started to water. And she screams at me, "You feel the devil's spirit coming." I can't take it anymore, I rub my eyes with my hands, I can't see a thing because of the tears, and then she started pouring her water on me and saying something like, "I'm washing the boy, the devils get the fuck out of here." I open my eyes, and there's her wrinkled cunt, fucking huge, and she, the bitch, is pissing on me. Her piss covered me all over, got into my eyes, started stinging like hell. Well, and then I remember my mother coming in and saying, "Why are you crying?" Well, and we left from there. By the way, I haven't seen any skulls since then. The story is real, I'm not thrall. Hi, first. Anyway, I live in Novosibirsk, and here's my story. When the curfew in the dorms was lifted in 2014, I started taking advantage of the opportunity to leave the dorm at night to go to the store. That's when I started walking at night. Sometimes I walked in places that weren't very conducive to night walks, the trolley. Anyway, in January 2015, something happened that still makes me piss myself, and I still don't walk alone at night. So that you, Anon, can understand my motivation for walking, I'll briefly outline why I walked, alone at night. A room for 4 people. A tavern, socks, and endless squabbles over an open window. Some are cold, others are fucking hot. One way or another, when I didn't sleep at night, I walked at night. In short, I apologize for this word, at about 4 o'clock in the morning I started getting ready to go for a walk. It was snowing quite heavily outside and the street lights were bright. Well, I dressed lightly, it was 4 degrees below zero outside. I walked. It was obvious that I was walking first in the snow. I felt like a pioneer. I walked along my street to the crossroads. Across the road was a park, which was about 800 meters long, with paths along its edges. I crossed the road and walked along the park. I walked slowly, plus it was inconvenient to walk quickly because there was a lot of snow. I walked and saw an old woman walking ahead. An old woman, like any old woman. Black coat, shawl on her head, slightly hunched over. Well, an ordinary old woman. And our speed was about the same, so even if I had caught up with her, it probably would have happened outside the park. And so we walked, probably, about 200 meters. And I caught myself thinking that I was the only one leaving tracks in the snow. After the old woman, the snow was untouched, there were barely distinguishable tracks of other people, which were almost covered over, but the snow was not so heavy that it would immediately cover up the tracks. And then I stopped. I watched, without blinking. And the old woman kept walking. Only she didn't walk in a swaying motion, like most old women, but simply moved forward. Like a toy soldier on a stand, which is moved back and forth. And the old woman was also moving. Then I having curried favor, changed my course 90 degrees to the right, towards the 24-hour store, which was a block away from where I was. I almost ran then. Anyway, I reached the store, went in, bought something to eat. I came out and stood next to it until the first people on their way to work appeared on the street. During this time, I smoked more than half a pack of cigarettes. I went back along a different route, because I was scared. Below is a plan diagram. The end of January. I'm walking home in the evening from my friend Pasha. The distance between our houses is not that great for a walk, we live 3 streets apart, about a kilometer shorter. Well, usually when I'm walking I immerse myself in a state of deep philosophical reflection. It's warm and damp, I'm definitely not dressed for winter, the rare passers-by either ignore me or look at me with apprehension and suspicion. Although I'm afraid of them myself. I walk up the slope, come out from around the corner, where there are still first-floor balconies, and glowing holes in the basements that are so enticing, where cats sometimes look from. They always seemed strange and not from here at all to me. I trudge on, pulling my sleeves down to my fingertips. Here's the most interesting part, a crowd of guys is coming towards me, they are making noise, drunk or just happy about something. Among them I recognize a girl. Katya used to be my EOT, until I became disillusioned with life. She recognized me, but didn't show it. But the guys who were in that company paid attention to me, but not the way a regular passerby pays attention to another. They started asking me questions about what I was doing, saying that I was getting busted. They must have taken me for a drug addict. One of them suggested that I come to his place, that's where they all said they were heading. Well, I refused. And he kept asking, so persistently. In the end, this dude gave me a wicker thing, like a bauble, saying beforehand, here's a gift for you, so you don't forget. What kind of idiots are they, in short, I thought. When I got home, I remembered school, and why I stopped bitching about my classmate and became a little unhinged. EOT died in a car accident in the 8th grade, when she was 14 years old. One of the most topical stories, since such a party started. Last year. Spring. I met one chick, we hung out in the same company, but initially on a high-bi level. One thing led to another, and this idiot is crazy about the occult. Well, I'm no fool, I read all sorts of bullshit on the internet, and let's joke with her about it. One thing led to another, we agreed to go to her house, with the whole gang, to drink beer. Her parents are always wandering around somewhere at work. By the time we got there, half the city to fuck on foot, the only ones left from the whole company were me, another guy and 2 chicks, the owner and a friend. We bought some junk on the way, went in, started drinking, and then this woman, I'll put a demon in myself. I'm bored. We started laughing, like, go get some sleep, you're talking bullshit. She got offended and ran into another room. We continued drinking. About 40 minutes later we heard a fucking scream from the room. We ran in, and this idiot had drawn a pentucka on her forehead with a black marker, stripped down to her underwear, was sitting in a circle of salt and screaming at the top of her lungs. I called out to her, and she turned around. I shit myself, Anon. White, absolutely white eyes. And then this asshole, I don't know what to call her, starts telling my biography. In full. Then the babe's girlfriends, then the cuna. Then she laughed, said that she was bored with us, and went limp. Fell asleep. The next morning she was silent, didn't remember a fucking thing, remembered that she only just walked into the room. Now we are tactfully silent, but I will never forget this. Anons, I'll write my own story. I have a dacha, far from the city, to get there you have to go a fair distance from the highway along country roads. And, Not far from the last village there is a place. As people say, not good. There is a small ravine there, and in the evenings fog often gathers. There are many accidents. Although one car passes there every half hour, people just fall down into the ravine, practically on level ground, on a dry road. I have seen tracks more than once, and once I saw an overturned car. They said that there were also corpses. People do not wear seat belts and break their necks when they fall. A local friend told me that UFOs are often seen there. But that's when you come, because only alcoholics go there, and they can see even worse things when they're drunk. So, I was returning to the dacha one day, late at night. Probably at 3 to 4 o'clock, in the dark. I'm driving slowly, I'm really tired, to hell with it, I think. And in that ravine I slowed down, just to be on the safe side. Suddenly I look. Eyes are glowing red ahead. 4 pairs, 2 lower, 2 higher. Right on the road. What the hell, I think. I slowed down some more, drove closer, and saw 2 people standing on the road. I couldn't really make out their faces, holding huge dogs, higher than their waists, by their collars. And one of them was waving at me, like, pull over to the side of the road. And he himself looked kind of weird. White mug, the dogs are also white, by the way, bald. I didn't know what to think anymore. And then I looked, fuck, and they weren't casting any shadows from the headlights. Dogs do, but people don't. I stepped on the gas and passed them in the oncoming lane. I looked in the rearview mirror. The second one, who was standing to the side, let go of the dog and pointed at me. I hit the floor. The dog runs, the engine roars, and the dog is clearly being caught. Getting closer and closer, then a characteristic sound, the dog grabbed the rear bumper, and the speed is already under 100. And then I fly into a pothole. I was looking through the rear window, I saw it, and a major one. If not for the belt, I would have hit the ceiling with my head. The car is thrown up, the dogs fall on the road together with the bumper. Gets up, shakes it off and runs back. The next day I wanted to go and see what happened to the bumper, but the Kamaz trucks from the quarry rolled it into dust. The car also survived, only the disc was bent. Well, since this is a thread about real stories, I'll write down the few things that happened to me. At one time, I was roofing with a friend in DS2, and once in the attic we found a dead cat hanging open and some bird skulls. We weren't too upset because we were big guys. I was fucking around with a knife, and my friend could have fucked us with bolt cutters. Probably some school kids or hiccups were playing with animals. Let's move on. At one time the girl I was messing around with lived in an apartment of a crazy granny. The apartment was on the first floor of a shitty building with bars and filled with icons, photos of dead people and Soviet furniture that was 1,000 fucking years old, plus cockroaches, dirt and junk. She told me that when her friends came to her, some of them felt really sick from the vomit-inducing atmosphere and icons. They even had to go outside or curtain them. I laughed, and that night when I fell asleep at her place, I had a terrible sleep paralysis. I felt some kind of bad presence from that ill-fated room. I tried to say something, but I just wheezed, while it was as if they were sucking energy out of me. Then she moved to a new apartment where everything was in perfect order. We fucked and lived normally. By the way, the chick was crazy. She claimed that she was a psychic. They even invited her to a show. She said she could read people and she believed in omens, auras, and other topics. She was pretty good at capturing emotions and was unusually suggestible, so this is most likely bullshit. Another thing that often happens to me is that the dreams I see are put in the wrong memory slot and I experience déjà vu. I also suffered from sleep paralysis and terrible visions every time I tried to fall asleep after 12, but it passed. It was a shitty period in my life and I drank a lot. I used to have a clock with chimes when I was about 5 years old, and I would get really scared every time it rang at noon. it made a really disturbing and really paranormal sound. Every time it rang, I would hide in a corner somewhere. If I dared to lie down on the couch, which was in the same room with this clock, I had to lie down or half lie down. It didn't work any other way. Then I would start hearing some bass and clear voice, and right in my head. It would ask me questions, but I don't remember what they were. I just remember that I was panicking and asking it to leave. Then my parents started to notice my paranoia and they opened the lid with me and showed me how this clock works, what makes that sound, etc., and all the creepiness disappeared. Then they sold it all together, and after that only one paranormal thing happened to me. I would return this watch and check all this, but who the hell knows who it was sold to. I'll tell you a story that is most often characterized by a certain presence of them in my life, and it happened in Moscow, and in principle is very interesting in its essence. In general, there was a lot of fucking strange stuff in my life, both mine and my loved ones. There were outright cliches, but there was and is no reason not to believe my relatives and their stories. After all, we are a military family, everyone is skeptic. I was 17 years old then, fucking hell, 7 years ago. I came to Moscow to submit documents to a university. Everything happens in Kategorod. By the way, there is a church right opposite the metro. This is just for the sake of completeness. I'm standing near the metro and calling my dad to coordinate what to do next, because he is driving somewhere in a car, and it seems he should pick me up. Then a dude comes up. I'm standing with a mobile phone to my ear. He says to me, "Oh, hey, Janayok," to which I reply, like, "What kind of Janayok am I to you?" And this lanky guy, at that moment taller than me, roughly 190 centimeters, grabs me, snatches the phone and drags it God knows where. There are tons of people around, but no one gives a shit. In general, he says, like, "If you scream, call the cops, I'll smash your phone." At 17, I still didn't understand how valuable life is, and I was afraid for my expensive phone. The dude holds me tightly and leads me, says, like, "Don't worry, dude, I'll call you now, then I'll even throw you some money and give it to you." And his phone supposedly died. In short, he sits me down next to him on the parapet of some crossing, calls some chick, they're screaming there, but I don't have any money either, so in a minute it's the end. The guy says, "Let's go, I'll throw you some money, I've already calmed down a little, let's go." We reached the turn and arrived. He grabs me for real and drags me into the building. That's how I looked at Moscow from the inside, a real underground. I didn't even think about anal spanking then. I probably didn't even know the term then, because I was never interested in porn like that, and I didn't double check. In general, I didn't think that he would fuck me, but now I would lol. The building looks ordinary on the outside, only there's a green mesh over the entire facade, like a major renovation. Inside, it's a total mess, just a total mess. Damp, dark, everything around is broken, fragments of cement and brickwork and broken glass. In short, the dude drags me into a small room with only one exit and stands in the doorway. Oh, I almost missed it, he was finishing his beer the whole time. I didn't like this bottle of beer right away, and I wanted to ask him to take a sip of beer and get rid of the bottle in the noise, but I didn't do it and it was too late. The thief smashes the bottle against the wall and it turns out to be the legendary rose. It stands there, and then there was a click in his gaze. I don't know how to explain it, it's not like in the movies, it's not like anywhere else, just a click and a different look. And he tells me, like, "Where's my phone?" That is, not my phone but his. He speaks loudly, demands that I give it back. At first I was polite, like, "Listen, bro, I didn't take your phone, why the hell do I need it, but you took mine." Then there's a dialogue in which we blame each other for the loss of the device. It looks pretty stupid, but in moments like these it's like you're in a mental hospital. You can't stay normal in a situation like this. when there's a wall behind you and a rose in front. The guy starts yelling, discontentedly, like a wounded orc. The echo rumbles ominously through the destroyed building. And then there's another click. The dude looks at me, his hands dropped. His hands. By the way, it is worth describing, again for the sake of completeness, the guy is tall, somewhere around 30 or over 30, small bald spots above the temples, which is a common phenomenon after the threshold of adulthood at 25 years, fair-haired, gray-eyed, light dark blonde stubble, not ugly, not a freak, in general, an ordinary Vajrayaman or Lyokadalini. Average build, dressed in jeans, flip-flops and a t-shirt. His hands dropped and he says to me, already in a completely different intonation, "Fuck, dude, I owe you my cell phone, yeah, I'll give it back now, fuck, I lost it somewhere, fuck, man, please forgive me, I don't even remember how, do you want me to give you some money? Please forgive me, but I don't know where I put your phone." I clearly remember holding it in my hands, and at the same time he takes out a wad of cash, a real wad of bills. I've never seen so much, because then only my mother worked, and her salary was 20k. And here he had several times more in hand, and shoved it at me, came up and tried to shove it into my shirt pocket. I was on guard, even though I was still a brat in fact, but I had already read a lot of things by that time and my brain was already working in the right direction, that the whole world is a danger, everyone wants to screw you, not even for profit. From the very beginning I began to suspect that this was some kind of scam, that they wanted to cheat me and throw me, that all this was deception and tricks. In principle, I believed so until the bitter end, that all this was part of the game, if not for one thing. Anyway, the dude turned out all his pockets, all 4 pockets of his jeans to be exact, and indeed, there were keys, cash, his phone, which he had so persistently demanded a few minutes earlier, but my phone was gone. This surprised me a lot, because I had been watching his every move since the moment he snatched the phone at the metro. That's why I was developing a plan with the bottle. Anyway, he apologizes, I'm describing it at length, but each stage lasts about 40 seconds. Then another click, he starts yelling, "Where's the phone? I'm going to take the door off its hinges now, why aren't you answering?" and other mumbo jumbo, like he's going to kill me now, what the fuck did I do to him here? I realize that it's fucked up. Behind me is a window bricked up, carelessly, with large holes, and reinforcement. The whole room is 1m x 2.5m, and he's standing at the end, again with the rose pointed at me. It's getting closer, slowly. I'll tell you this, there's no life before your eyes, no animal fear, at least I didn't have it. But I froze, just like concrete, neither my arms nor my legs moving, complete numbness, and there is fear, because the awareness of the impending injury, violence, and maybe even death is gradually coming. No one will come and save me, no one even knows what's going on behind these walls, no one, including the people whose shadows flicker through the holes in the masonry of the wall behind me. What life before your eyes are we talking about? I thought of every way to save myself, to slip under the offender's arm and quickly appear behind him, twist him, hit him in the head with a brick I had marked in advance, and give him a good slap on the wrist. Military family, military upbringing, hand-to-hand combat since childhood, all that stuff. Only they didn't teach me how to fight back from Rose, lol. In general, he is already so close that I can smell beer and nighttime fumes mixed with bitter tobacco, and the oniony smell of sweat. And then that very thing happens. He asks me, "Do you believe in God?" "I do," I answer. "And do you wear a cross?" And then I took out my cross, I wanted to prove that I wear it, that I believe. I had a hard time understanding what it was for and why at all. Like, as soon as I saw my cross, it disappeared. No, he didn't leave, Anons, I didn't see him turn around and leave, just hop and he's gone. He didn't teleport, but he retreated so quickly and imperceptibly that I didn't understand how it happened. But before that, I managed to see fear in his eyes. For some reason they seemed brown to me at that moment, although they had been blue or gray before. Of course, I associate this with shock, like my memory was overstrained along with my brain and they both blocked the ending, because the climax was very intense. I remember how I was already going outside, trying to find the gleam of an accidentally dropped phone in the dark along the way. And then it was like in a movie. Rays of light, dust flying in them, the smell of dampness, a bright light in my eyes. A bunch of people, several patrols of cops, but they didn't come for this guy, they were just passing by, minding their own business or not. In any case, they didn't know what happened and what could have happened right under their noses. That's the story, it all happened, honestly. Since then, I haven't taken off the cross for several years, then it turned black, and I took it off. I've been wearing the Dalboslav symbolism for 2 years, but my family is old believers. We have our own understanding of God. That's how it is. Remember, guys, no one will save you from this. What can I say in conclusion? I think I stumbled upon evil, not as romantic or ferocious as in books and fairy tales, not as fatal and inevitable as in films and creepy stories, but it was evil, a demon, an obsession, call it what you will. First of all, I didn't think so, it was a difficult year in general, and mysticism, and not only mysticism, but still some oddities really overcame me. A month before this event, I almost died. The doctor would have been late for a couple of hours and bye-bye. But now I still think so, because I dared to share with my family what happened, and this prompted them to tell me no less terrible things from their lives. I'll tell you my story too. It happened about 10 to 12 years ago. I was still in elementary school. My mother worked until the evening. My grandmother sat with me. My grandmother was terribly authoritarian, and one of her orders for me was to take a nap during the day. My excuses didn't work. They said that a child needs to restore his strength. Although there was no particular rush in elementary school, I slept well at night. Accordingly, I almost never wanted to sleep during the day, and I stupidly lay around with my eyes closed from about 3 to 5 p.m., and my grandmother periodically checked the room. And then one day I finally fell asleep, woke up in the evening, it was dark outside, a night light was burning on the nightstand next to me. I've been afraid of the dark all my life. My grandmother knew about it back then, she turned it on at dusk. In general the room was semi-dark, but you can see most of the objects. And so I'm lying there, gathering my strength to throw off the warm blanket and crawl out into the cold world, when suddenly I notice that the seat of the chair standing right in front of my bed has straightened out from its concave position, as if someone invisible had been sitting there and stood up. I won't lie about some sounds, because at least as many years have passed since I was then, or even more, but I can say for sure that the door to the room was ajar by about 30 centimeters, so some NEH could have easily come out there without touching anything else along the way. I can also say for sure that this is not an OS or paralysis either, because I had both phenomena more than once when I was 16 to 17, and each time the awakening was sharp like diarrhea and often scary, lol. But then, as a child, I wasn't even particularly surprised or scared. My relatives unanimously told me about a brownie, whom they for some reason called with them from their old apartment when they moved to this one, like this brownie walks around and inspects his possessions. But why the hell would he look at me sleeping, and then decisively leave upon my awakening? I don't understand. By the way, since I already talked about OS and paralysis, it all started during the period before the Unified State exam. I was extremely scared, I was sick and generally had to miss school often, for which I got into trouble. Once, while sleeping, I realized, I don't know how, that I was lying on my side with my eyes half open and essentially clearly saw a closet that was standing 60 centimeters from the bed. And then right on the wood of this closet, as if some kind of screen or something began to be reflected, it is not clear from what. As if a TV was built in. And inside you can see even rows of bright pink circles. Then I understand that I want to get closer and I find myself as if inside the scrap, and everything is already in 3D, I can move between the rows of these glowing circles, move them aside like a curtain, etc. Other OS were dull and from the series I'm dreaming of unpleasant crap, it's not real, I order myself to wake up. My paralysis was weird, only if my ears were plugged and no sounds from the outside world reached me, earplugs or vacuum headphones. I plugged them like that because of my cat, who went crazy and screamed like a bitch in March. Well, the paralysis only happened with my ears plugged and only if I slept on my left side. I didn't really hear any sounds, only in the mirror, which now hangs above the place of that very chair, I saw all sorts of creepy stuff like killer jaw, although the mirror hangs high and usually from a lying position in bed you can only see the wall above the bed. And the crap in the mirror was staring right into my soul, brr. Like from a screen. I woke up shaking and screaming. Gradually, all such attacks practically disappeared, now they happen once every 1 or 2 years, when I'm very nervous and fall asleep anxiously. That's how it is. In short, I was about 7 years old then, but everything was so clear that I can't forget. Actually, the story itself, I wrote it on 4store, so the text is a little artistic. I had hepatitis B. The disease itself is bad, and I also started having complications. One evening I felt really bad, they took blood for analysis several times, I was vomiting, I had a temperature of almost 40. In this state, I fell asleep, from this moment the main story begins. When I started having this dream, I immediately realized that I was in a dream, that is, it was a lucid dream. I was in some kind of gray-black-purple desert without the slightest signs of life. After a while, I felt someone's presence. And almost immediately, some kind of snake with incomprehensible growths on its head like horns or spikes appeared nearby, like the one in the picture, only black and purple. It began to crawl around me and very quickly surrounded me. She raised her head above me, and I realized that this was the end. But then 2 people appeared not far away in the air, a man and a girl, and I had a feeling that I knew them. They were hovering in the air, carefully watching what was happening. The snake sometimes made a mix of hissing and growling in their direction, it was clear that she did not like it. My hope that they would help me began to fade, when suddenly the man said words that I still remember, "Let faith serve as your shield, and will, a weapon." I don't remember much of what happened next, and I don't want to invent them. I only remember that the girl came down to me and touched me, after her touch I immediately felt better, and the man, continuing to hover in the air, said something to us. After that, I woke up absolutely healthy, and the doctors confirmed my complete recovery. Can someone explain to me what kind of dream that was, and who these people were? Creepy or not, but my friend and I really shit ourselves that time. It was summer, there was nothing to do, so in our bright young minds an idea was born to go and mess around in an abandoned burnt-out house in the private sector of Ransk. He and other guys had been there many times before, and the house itself, although not turned into a garbage dump of graffiti and bottles, was still pretty famous. No one had noticed anything creepy there before, duh. So we got there, climbed over the piss from fallen branches, and went into the first building. The area was small, but there were several buildings on it, a small house with an attic, a huge barn, a toilet torn down to the frame, a burnt-out bathhouse, a tiny building, and some other huge mug with tiny windows. It looked like a sheet metal structure, there was a huge padlock on the door, and the tiny windows had the remains of a bent grate. I tried to shine a light in there, having climbed onto the roof of the barn, but there was nothing to shine with except for the phone, on which I was filming our entire hike for some fucking reason, and a pocket flashlight. But fuck it, the structure is interesting, but a padlock is a padlock. So we went into the house first. We took some pictures. We tried to climb into the attic, putting all sorts of crap under our feet, like Gordon Freeman, but it was too low, and the ladder, I don't remember why, was inaccessible. And we wanted to climb in to get a huge orange box, which was welded square pieces of metal. We couldn't get it, either because we weren't strong enough, or because the box was heavy. Then we went straight to the barn. I was mercilessly shocked from the barn, if only because as soon as we entered, a strange piece of shit caught my eye on the side. The barn had a basement. On the first floor there was some kind of construction like a metal slide leading down. On its sides there were some kind of huge gears, but how this mechanism works and why the fuck it is needed at all, we did not understand. We agreed that it could have been a device for a car and its transportation. On the floor of the barn, an ordinary concrete floor, for some reason, in addition to various junk, scraps of burnt pages were scattered. I also picked them up and turned them over in my hands on camera. Then I found scraps from the cover of Edgar Poe editions, maybe someone has such, green, with gold letters. We went down to the basement for only a second, because there was no normal light, it was fucking scary. We stood on the ladder, filmed a bowl, either empty or with water inside, didn't hear any sounds or anything like that. We went up. For some reason I got the urge to take another picture of those burnt covers. I'm sitting on my haunches, twirling them in my hands, my buddy is standing behind me. There's no wind, the weather is sunny and hot. And then from the basement, right below us, we hear something falling. Or moving. It sounded like a plastic bottle or something plastic. We jumped up, ran away, cursing ourselves for climbing. The most important thing is that the sound remained on the video. We watched it 100 times and each time we wet ourselves because something started moving in the windless room. I remember, in my childhood, when I lived with my granny, I was always afraid to sleep for some fucking reason, and so I spent the night in the same bed with my granny, turning on the light in the next room, because I was pissing myself from the darkness. One day after watching Minute of Fame, I remember that evening well, my granny and I went to bed, as always, turning on the light in the next room. I fell asleep peacefully, not noticing anything special. Waking up for some unknown reason, I decided to turn over on my other side, facing the center of the room. I slept facing the wall. It was the first time I experienced such a sensation. My head seemed to shrink from fear, and it was covered with heat. I saw my own sweater hanging in the air, and it wasn't that it was hanging, its arm was leaning on the table and resting on it. It seemed like someone had put it on, but, vash, I only saw emptiness. Fucking emptiness instead of a head and legs, and even more so there was no one to put it on, because there was no one in the house except for Grandma. Grandma was sleeping next to me. This invisible piece of shit that put on my sweater seemed to be admiring us, putting her elbow on the table. I remember how I crawled under the blanket, and how wildly my heart was beating. I remember deathly silence. I don't understand how I fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I saw this sweater lying on the back of the chair. First, some shit is happening. I live in a house with 2 owners, but the neighboring apartment has been empty since about autumn. The first time this phenomenon happened a few weeks ago. It was late evening, I was sitting with Tna in my room behind the stove. We were happily surfing the internet, chatting about nothing at the same time, and I accidentally glanced at the window that looked out onto the neighbor's yard and slightly freaked out from what I saw. I saw as if someone was shining an LED flashlight into my window, like at a peak. I closed the window with the curtains and told Tna that the idiot neighbor decided to spy on us, like, what if we fuck? After giggling, I forgot about this case. In the morning, on my way to school, I looked into the neighbor's yard and did not find any footprints in the meter-high snowdrifts. Until today, I forgot about this nonsense, until it happened again. Around the same time, I was sitting with Tna, like that day. We were just going crazy, wrestling, fighting, making noise. Tanya stopped and said that someone was shining a flashlight in the window. I turned around and looked out the window to make sure. She wasn't lying. I seriously freaked out, closed the window with the curtains and went outside without putting on my outerwear to kick that asshole's ass. I went to the fence and didn't see anyone. I got the feeling that I was nuts, but Tanya also saw that light from the flashlight. After seeing Tyan home, I looked into the neighbor's yard again and saw nothing. What do you advise me, Anon? I'll probably get into it. Not quite on topic, but I think it will be interesting too. Night Cellar ITT. I live and work in a small town, or rather an urban-type settlement, in the far north. God-forsaken and God-forsaken places. Lots of stories about people going missing in the surrounding forests and all sorts of devilry. Maybe I'll somehow strain the locals and old-timers about such tales, but that's a completely different story. JPG. There is no outright creepiness except for the general atmosphere. I go to work at 9 p.m. through the empty streets of a provincial backwater, rows of Khrushchev-era buildings, dilapidated barracks, well, you get the idea. A small shop at a bakery is practically located outside the city limits. Beyond that, only fields and forests. Which also makes me want to give up. And I have several regular customers, about whom I want to tell you. A cheerful cock. Comes often, quite friendly. He speaks Russian very poorly. He tried to tell me something several times, but I didn't understand a thing from his gibberish. He loves sweets very much. No brainer, he constantly buys cakes and drinks tea, so as not to lie, with 6 spoons of sugar. I don't know why, but this moment bothers me. Maybe he's just a cheerful sweet tooth. But I know that he's an alien beetle. Cipollino. I'm not sure I spelled this word correctly, but who cares? I nicknamed him that for the absolutely round shape of his head and his love of onion bread. In contrast to the cock, he's always serious and silent. He comes every night and buys 2 loaves of bread with onions. He always pays on the spot. A very shady and strange guy. A watchtower. It was because of this bastard that I started keeping a huge kitchen knife under the counter. He got the nickname Kalanche for his enormous height, obviously more than 2 meters, and his thinness. He always wears windbreakers and a down jacket with the hoods pulled tightly down. I have never been able to see his face. He also comes every night. He comes in absolutely silently, looks over the goods for a few minutes in silence, and leaves just as silently. He has never bought anything yet, Anon. Never. A couple of times I tried to talk to him and find out what the hell he wanted. Maybe he was looking for something specific, you never know. He ignored my questions and left silently. That's how it was. And I got a call from the past. I was sitting, you see, at work. My schedule is free, so I usually stay until 7 o'clock. And then a call from an unfamiliar number, well, not an unfamiliar number, not written down in a book, but clearly imprinted in my memory. The number was a friend with whom I live in the same building. Only when he was a student, he changed SIM cards like gloves, so the old number was lost more than 7 years ago. Mine, by the way, hasn't changed for about 12 years. I pick up the phone, and there is a familiar voice of a friend, only a child's one says. Anon name, where are you, we're tired of waiting for you, and take out the water, like you promised. Kaniema's mom is already calling home, she'll take the ball in half an hour. I'm dumbfounded, I answer automatically that you have the wrong number and hang up. After 5 minutes I decide to call back. You never know, my friend was joking, but the number is unavailable. I dial his current contact. He picks up the phone and says that he and Tyan are at the cinema now and will call back. Later I told him about this incident, but he decided that I was playing a joke on him. A relative of mine told me the story. I don't remember who he is to me, but it doesn't matter. In the early 90s, he lived in Novosibirsk and worked for an entrepreneur. He had to return home from work very late, and he had to walk past unlit courtyards and vacant lots. In the winter, he was walking home through some yard. He was walking and saw that a car was slowly following him. He thought it was strange. He turned into the next yard, the car followed him there too. He turned into another, still didn't leave him behind. In the third, the same story. Then he got really scared. After all, it was the 90s, all sorts of things happened to people, and ran from there. The car, again, was following him. He saw a gap between two houses, where there was no way to get through, and ran in that direction. The car stopped for a second, a couple of healthy guys got out and followed him on foot. He thought things were really bad. An idea came to mind to hide. He saw a trash can and climbed in, burying himself up to his head. He sat there quietly and heard those two walking around and whispering to each other. This went on for about 2 minutes, then the noise of that same car was heard. It stopped and someone, apparently the driver, asked, "Well, didn't work out? Let's go on, we'll catch others." Judging by the sound, those two listened, as the sound of doors closing and the sound of a car driving away was heard. The stunned relative sat in the trash can for another 2 or 3 hours until he finally tried to get out and get home. Who it was and what happened to him, he still has no idea. Holy shit. There's an electromagnetic anomaly in my couch. It all started when I put my headphones on it about 4 days ago, which I bought exactly a week ago. I couldn't remember which part of the couch I put them in. Then, when I picked them up from the couch, one of the headphones stopped working. I carefully took apart the broken ear and made sure that the wiring and soldering were all okay. And the wiring couldn't have bent at the base, there's an L-shaped plastic plug there. And I don't think the wire itself could have broken. I didn't twist the knots or throw them anywhere. By the way, those headphones also had a volume control. I carefully took it apart and looked at it. The terminals, wiring, and soldering were not damaged. Therefore, it's not known at all where they broke/burned out. Then, last night, a USB cable from my Android was stretched across the same couch. The point is that I use my phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot, and at the same time charge it via USB, since the hotspot eats up the battery in a matter of hours. So, one fine day the phone plays a short vibration and turns off, the internet connection is interrupted. When I try to turn on the phone, it refuses. I took the USB cable out of the laptop and connected it to the standard charger. But again it did not want to charge or turn on. Then I connected it to the outlet in another room. The same thing again. Having scored on this shit, I took out the battery and somehow connected it to the frog. And the strangest thing is, it was charging. That is, something was wrong with the USB cable. And this morning, without knowing why, I hoped to connect the phone to the laptop via that same USB. The phone remained approximately on the same part of the sofa where it was yesterday. And suddenly, it turned on and started charging. Then after some time I plugged it into the socket, but it did not charge. And it did not charge from any other socket either. Then I began to have suspicions. That's when the idea of an electromagnetic anomaly in the form of a closed electromagnetic zone came to me, a cocoon of a field that cancels out any external EM signals, and I decided to test them experimentally. I connected the phone to the laptop again, sitting in approximately the same place, the phone was charging. I moved away a couple of decimeters, the phone stopped charging. In this way, by trial and error and by eye, I determined the exact zone of this cocoon and marked its boundaries with a simple pencil, on the blanket. Then I took the headphones and plugged them into the laptop, sitting in that very place. And the strangest thing is that the non-working ear worked, and the working one, on the contrary, didn't work. Now I'm even afraid to put anything there or sit there myself. Because in humans, life activity also occurs due to electricity, bioelectric currents, and being in such a zone can limit or somehow restructure the area of the body in the cocoon. That is, yes, a person is not a machine, and nerves and cells are not shitty copper wires that melt at the slightest short circuit. But it is unknown how, for example, a hand would behave if it were there for a long time. Would it lose sensitivity or, on the contrary, would it sharpen many times? And yes, I unfolded the sofa to see what was inside and near the tray. There is nothing there, no jammers, emitters, or anything else. Empty. Only dust. The story is not particularly creepy, but true. I was 12 to 13 years old, myself since '89, when we decided to go with the guys to a nearby children's camp. The camp was located in the thorn forest, not deep, almost at the very beginning, but we had to ride uphill through hills and plantings. We saddled our bikes and set off. Halfway there, we wanted to take a leak and turned into a planting, behind which there was a hilly area. Having done our business, we decided to pick strawberries and just chat about everything. Suddenly Oleg, that's the name of one of the companions, saw something strange on the opposite hill. At first it seemed to me that it was a horse grazing, but upon closer inspection, I realized that this was not so. On the slope of the hill opposite us, NYOH was doing some crazy dances, which really resembled a horse, only if she stood on her hind legs, i.e. in size. This thing was 2 or 3 times larger than the tallest person, it was completely black, it moved in a strange way, waving its arms, which was actually quite funny. We didn't dare go down our hill and up the opposite one closer to NYOH, but for some reason I decided to walk closer to the other slope and saw houses below. The street was almost abandoned, only gypsies lived there. Something like a prayer was heard from one yard, some poems read in a sing-song voice. The voice was loud, as if they were talking into a microphone. I only remembered one phrase, "You are trading a soul knee-deep in blood." This sent a chill down my spine, but I went even more crazy when I saw that there were already 2 NYOH. I shouted to my friends that we needed to get lost, and something dancing opposite at a decent distance heard. 2 black figures merged into one again and turned 180 degrees. I didn't see any eyes, or a face, or anything. But I realized that the creature had been standing with its back to us, and when it heard my voice, it turned around. Then it squatted down strangely, as if it were doing some kind of dance move, some kind of curtsy, and simply disappeared. It evaporated. The hill became empty right before our eyes. Then from the other side of the hill, where they were reading poetry, came the cries of many voices. I couldn't make out what they were shouting, but we grabbed our bikes and ran away from there as fast as we could. I told my ancestors about it, but they decided that I had made it all up. I still don't understand what it was. My friends and I sometimes recall this incident, but none of them have offered any suggestions as to what it could have been. I remember a couple of stories. I'll try to describe them coherently, and most importantly, at least remember all the details. So, I was 11 to 12 years old. A classmate invited me to her birthday. There were about 5 people, all from the same class. And her brother is a brat. A relative gave him a talking toy that same day. You know the kind, you press on the belly, and all sorts of crap starts pouring out. She turns it on to play with the little one and all sorts of gibberish begins to pour. Maybe I'm the only one so impressionable, but everyone present clearly heard the phrase "I am the devil." Okay, we thought we imagined it. But everything was repeated again and again. Of course, we had a big shit then, but after that day, I wrote it off to the riot of our imagination, inflamed by lemonade bubbles. And I remembered this story not so long ago, in a conversation with this same classmate. We hadn't seen each other for about 5 years. When we had already discussed everything important, I remembered that incident. And she told me the rest. The toy, she said, was really strange. It turned on by itself, and in the end it just started making a simple hissing sound. They threw it somewhere in a corner, as if it were broken. And then her little brother got sick. He said it got worse and worse every day. The parents ran to the doctors. She decided to throw the toy away, and oh yeah, Anon. The little one started to get better. Of course, all this is most likely a banal coincidence, but as this friend admitted to me, it left an unpleasant aftertaste. Considering that the ties with that relative were terminated at some point. A classmate asked her mother, "Why doesn't Aunt X come to visit us?" But there was no clear answer. She heard in passing about the alleged involvement of that aunt in black magic, but since then, the classmate has not been seriously interested in it. One more story. This time my favorite theme of village creepy. It was about 10 to 12 years ago, in the village where I came for the summer. The neighbor's husband is a drinker. And here I will immediately make a note, his nickname is Sailor. In his young sober days he was, of course, a sailor. And then the classic, the 90s, bankruptcy of the enterprise, privatization, loses his job, etc. 1. Summer, drunk, he fell into a ravine. A ravine is a place in the village, although not in its middle, but not on the outskirts either. A deep spacious hole with a dense mini forest. Usually, all sorts of garbage was brought there, but fishermen were also frequent guests. They dug worms, plus, there was a short path to the river. You can go down into it by an accessible path. Fortunately, the paths are trodden. But the neighbor fell there down the slope, maybe he was pushed. They found him a week later, buried him, all according to tradition. Several weeks passed. My dad, an avid fisherman, was visited by his friend, of course, also a fisherman. I didn't hang out with them, fishing didn't appeal to me, so I was in the next room, playing with the cat, periodically eavesdropping on their conversation out of curiosity. But here I listened to everything from the very beginning, because Dad's friend came in a very serious mood. Usually a cheerful, sociable man, not at a loss for words, was gray and gloomy. A brief retelling of his monologue. He went fishing along that very path through the ravine. He fished until the evening, the fish were biting, he didn't want to leave. But he still got ready to go home, almost at 9 o'clock. It was still twilight in the summer. He walked through that ravine. And in the ravine forest it was even darker than in the open space. He sees a figure standing to the side. He thought that one of his fisherman friends was also walking ahead of him. He went to meet the figure to say hello, but about 5 meters before it, he realized that it was that same sailor. Of course, he almost shit himself with fear, he says. He ran, as far as it was possible at his 50 years, through the forest, through branches scratching his face. And that ravine was soon fenced off with concrete slabs. Shalom, Antasha. I have some cool ones that happened to me personally. When I was in the 11th grade, one very interesting incident happened. It was in winter, before the new year. Then we were preparing for the test unified state exam. This also happens, it supposedly shows the student's readiness for the exam, in mathematical analysis, and it turned out that the consultation ended at 9 o'clock in the evening. I study in the first shift, it's just that the exam was supposed to be the next day. Tired, hungry, and angry, I was walking home. It was about 10 minutes walk to the house. I tried to walk as quickly as possible. I live in Mukosransk and my house is on the main street. So, I literally walk from lamppost to lamppost, crumpling some papers in my pocket, and suddenly I notice that 2 lampposts away from me there is a guy walking ahead of me, only a strange one. All black, and he was passing under a street lamp. In theory he should have been visible, tall, slim, and holding his back straight. Something about this really caught my eye. They don't walk like that in our Mukosransk, they usually just slouch. We pass 3 street lamps and suddenly I see a guy walking and at the same time getting smaller, falling on all fours, and then I see a black cat walking further and turning somewhere into the courtyards. I just stopped and stood there in shock for about 40 seconds, and then in horror I ran to the other side of the street and ran home. I run home, tell my mom, and she reminded me of a similar incident that happened to her, back when I was a happy first grader. At the time, we lived in another apartment, on the other side of town, right by the forest. Opposite our windows there was an asphalt road that ran along the house, right behind it the forest began, and this road also led into the forest, lol. Well, at 1 in the morning my mom was smoking on the balcony and noticed some black guy also dropped to all fours while walking, turned into a cat and abruptly turned into the forest, meowing. In general, who the fuck knows what to think? But it was real, there was no cat there or nearby. My eyesight with glasses is excellent, I never go anywhere without them. And the tall guy couldn't have disappeared to who knows where, and out of nowhere. Second cool story, when I was about 9 years old, my dad, his 2 friends and their kids, and some other old school fishermen went fishing in Chatura. So you understand the whole point, Anon, these are peat lakes behind some fucking dense forests. Anyway, first we drove from the village into the forest for about 30 kilometers, then abandoned the jeeps in the forest, because we couldn't go any further, and then walked another 8 kilometers. The forests are really wild. My dad saw wild boars when he swam to the other side. One of our assholes managed to catch a fox, which then got away. In short, a lot of animals. One of our fishermen even said that he saw old wolf tracks. That's how it all went. We came to the place where the fishermen led us, set up camp. Night fell. The guys were telling stories around the campfire, because they were already tipsy. We, that is, the assholes, had already run off to the tent to sleep, because it had gotten a bit cold. We were lying in the tent, farting, laughing, and suddenly we heard a rustling sound and some new male voice. We looked out of the tent and saw a small guy, 170 to 175 centimeters tall, clean-shaven, middle-aged, black-haired, in a gray sweater and black padded pants, coming out of the forest towards us. No gear, no backpack, no weapon. He greeted our guys and asked which way he should go to get to the village. The guys said that it was a long way to the village, and the road was not easy. Anyway, we showed the guy the way, and he disappeared. About 10 minutes passed, I was laughing my ass off again in the tent with the guys, when suddenly I heard some scream. We get out and find out what one fisherman was shouting, who went to take a piss after the guy and didn't see a single trace of him. In general, all the hops left the fisherman, as I understood, only now everyone got inspired and started thinking about who it was. An escaped prisoner or a soldier, it doesn't fit. The nearest colony is 150 kilometers from here, there were never any military units here at all, and there were only 2 roads in our place. The guy left along one road, which led to the village, and the road he came along, well, that one generally led to some real swamps, where no one went. In general, we thought and thought, did not think of anything, and gave a damn. The rest of the time on this lake was ordinary in terms of paranormal activity. Nothing scary, because no one went into the forest, everyone was afraid of mosquitoes the size of a fist. In general, you ask, Antosh, what the hell is scary about some random dude? So, this was a guy in the middle of the forest, without food, without a backpack. Later at home I was fucking shitting myself when I realized all this. And about 6 months later I found out about the bandit Kudyar, who had been causing trouble in those parts for a long time. Only then did I notice that the guy spoke a bit old-fashioned, although his clothes were quite modern. Who the fuck knows? If I'm in the mood, I'll write some more cool ones that happened to my mom and dad, both from the village. We've seen so much shit, it's fucking awesome. Well, I have such stories. Anyway, I had to live with my grandmother on my father's side. My grandmother, was a pretty nasty person. She quarreled with all the relatives she could, she drove my parents to divorce, she bullied me and my sister so much that we ended up in the hospital a couple of times. And so, she works at the market, and one day she needed to go to Novosibirsk or somewhere else for downy shawls. So she left me to look after the house. And the atmosphere in her apartment is so-so, in both senses. Clothes for sale are lying in a separate room since the 90s, probably. Stale Chinese synthetics stink worse than kerosene, it hurts your eyes, and the house itself is not in the most prosperous area. Heroin addicts tried to rob me in the entrance a couple of times during the day, and in the neighboring apartments you can constantly hear the screams of either small children or crazy grannies. You can't figure it out. In the apartment, there are golden icons, as expected, on the sideboard, and right under them are volumes on teaching dark magic with some runes painted on them, and photographs of some women with burnt eyes, and under them is a 19th century Bible with a torn cover, a rough plan painted in paint. Anyway, I'm sitting there at night, staring at the TV, and they're showing some zombie trash. There are no curtains on the windows, it's pitch black behind the glass. Then bang, a blow to the glass. I go out onto the balcony, a small bird, either a jay or a nightingale, I'm no expert, its neck is broken, it's lying on its back, its wings are in all directions, and its beak is opening and closing. I don't know what to do with it, and I feel sorry for it, and there's no way to stop its suffering, so I wrap it tightly in some kind of rag and leave it lying there so I can go and bury it properly in the flowerbeet in the morning. But that's not all. About an hour and a half passed, the movie just ended, I was getting ready to go to bed, laid out the sofa, opened 2ch on my netbook, when at about 3 a.m. some kind of commotion started in the kitchen. At first I wrote it off to mice, I myself have caught these guys doing shady things a couple of times. Well, the doors creak, oh well, it's not my house anyway, let this old hag take a shit in her buckwheat. But then someone started sorting the plates in the dryer. Monotonously, slap, 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 with an interval of a second. I stare into the dark corridor, where the turnoff from the hall to the kitchen is, no one. Did I take a shit? Of course. Then it gets worse, someone started walking around the kitchen, wet slaps on the linoleum, stomp stomp stomp, like a baby slaps on the floor, and the fucking bitch went into the corridor. And I froze sitting on the couch and looked into the corridor, which is right opposite it. I would at least lock myself, but the fucking arch is a fucking European-style renovation. Although at that moment I wouldn't have moved even under the sights of a fucking Abrams, but the fucking arch with the darkness behind it is fucking hell. As soon as the steps reached the doorway, silence. And that's it, I sat like that until dawn, staring at that fucking arch. As it began to get light, I gained courage and went to the kitchen, and there was a mess. All the doors of the cabinets and nightstands were open, and there were stains of dirt on the linoleum like some kind of rich black soil, and the food was all unsealed, cereals, flour, sugar, salt, spices, as if the packages had been cut with scissors, only the refrigerator was untouched. I had to clean up. Granny arrived, immediately asked if something had happened, as if she sensed it. I said that a bird had crashed into the window in the middle of the night, and didn't say anything about the kitchen. She looked at me so intently, as if she knew I was hiding something. She only said that a bird in the window was a sign of a dead person. As I continued living with her, I noticed one strange feature: she always left a glass of wine on top of the drying cabinet at night, next to the ventilation. When asked why, she denied it, saying that it was a sign of a good night's sleep, and other nonsense. In the morning, the glass was always empty. Considering that there was nowhere else to spend the night in a strange city, I had to stay to live with her for a while. The noise in the kitchen at night occasionally appeared again, but rarely and quietly, and did not leave such consequences. Everything was always clean, only the glass was always empty in the morning. 5 years have passed since then, and it seems like I already live in another city, and all this was forgotten, for a while. But recently I got in touch with my dad. He fiercely despises me, and communicates more with my sister, and I just go with them somewhere for company, to the skating rink, to the cinema, to some mall. So, he recently gave us some stones. He says they are from the sea, real ones. They look like glass with sparkles. So, after that I started having terrible nightmares, including with my granny. The other day I woke up from one of them, went to the kitchen, had tea with cookies, and had a smoke, and then the situation happened. All the cookies were gone. They were there and then they were gone. I don't really like them. My sister doesn't eat flour products at all. We usually leave them for guests. And in my nightmares this granny walks around the apartment and laughs. And in general, if I used to sleep normally in complete darkness, now I can only do it with a nightlight, and only after locking the door to the room tightly. Even my sister woke up several times at night and said that someone was walking along the corridor and looking at us while we were sleeping. But it can't enter the room. In all my dreams it only catches me when I go out into the corridor myself. I would write it all off as a dream, but such mysticism. By the way, there is a horseshoe and an icon hanging above the door to the room. My mother is slightly orthodox. My sister and I live in a one-room apartment with her, and she moved in with her stepfather, but we pay the utilities in half. That's the situation, at first. Now I remembered all this, when I was writing, and I even felt uneasy when it all came together in one picture. Well, when everything is scattered in fragments in your memory, it is not so scary. Well, it happened. Well, at least I spoke out. I remembered my story. Like many kids, I was sent to camps in the summer. I liked it: new friends, communication and, if I was lucky, love. At that time, my parents screwed up somewhere and we had problems with money. As a result, they sent me to a shitty camp on the Azov Sea. The camp was a typical Soviet camp, although there were 2,000 plus people outside. What's strange is that there were several statues of some woman in the camp. I don't remember. Maybe even of a woman angel. Sorry Anon, I don't remember. The main statue was in the center of the camp, next to the dining hall. There were several smaller ones in the outskirts of the camp. The first days of the camp were ordinary. Everyone was just starting to communicate with each other, make friends and gather in their own companies. I was lucky, because I was sociable and was in the company of good guys. Not much time passed, everything was ordinary, except for one but the building of the house where the assholes lived. By the way, at that time the smallest assholes lived in that building, which was a couple of steps from the central statue, began to empty. In addition, up until that moment we often heard the screams and cries of assholes in the middle of the night, but did not attach any importance to it. And so, after some time, we began to ask the counselor, like, what the fuck? To which we received a banal I don't know. That same evening, with our purely male company, we decided to wander around the camp after lights out, and at the same time go into that building. However, we were told all the time that physical education teachers walk around the camp at night, and if someone catches their eye, bad things will happen to him, but of course this did not stop anyone. 2 a.m. Half of them merge. There are 4 of us left. The first place we visited was that building. Nothing unusual, except for whitewash in some rooms. Wait a minute. A lot of whitewash. It is in almost every room, on the windows, window sills, floor. We get the hell out of there, but we don't go back to the building. We pass that very statue. I'm really scared. I look at it. I feel really shitty. I'm speechless. We just start running away from it. We stop at the fence, behind which there's a descent to the sea. We look at the fence. There's a statue, all in foliage so it's hard to see. We start shining a light on it. The statue's eyes are covered in something black. We run. We go to the building. We wake up the counselor with our screams and noise. She, so as not to wake anyone else, drags us into her room and locks it. After some silence, she asks what happened. The one who still has the gift of speech tells her everything. What happened next, Anon, was a bit of a mess. She started telling us about that very building. She said that they were assholes. They said that they saw a statue looking into their window, that walked around the building at night, after which most of the assholes were taken by their parents, and the others moved to other buildings. She also added that the gym teachers stopped walking around the camp at night, that's why no one caught us. She said that everything would be fine, the main thing was to go to bed. I won't add that we were shitting bricks that night and no one fell asleep. In the morning, we walked away a little. Other counselors, having learned what happened at night, began to tell us that it was just a child's fantasy and self-hypnosis, that the kids from that building left because their shift was over. A week later, our shift was over and we fucked off, forgot everything that happened. Hello/SN/ I'm writing my story. I was a little brat for about 12 years plus dash. And I had a great grandmother who loved to come visit me and she was wildly curious. She took all sorts of papers and always read them. Seeing receipts she immediately looked at how much to pay and so on. In general she was curious. So one day she came and sat down to watch TV in the living room and then hung around by the window waiting for my mother. I was just sitting at my stove in my room. Later, Grandma left without waiting for my mother. About an hour later, my mother came. It was somewhere in the middle of the day, about 1500 hours. Having entered the living room, she immediately called out to me. And so I stand in the living room and she asks, "What is this?" At first I didn't understand what she was talking about. She added, "There's a face on the window." I looked closely and really saw an imprint of a face. The imprint was as if someone had pressed their face very close to the glass and breathed in. The face was all wrinkled and looked as if it had been pressed very hard into the window, even the eyelids were visible. If I go into more detail, the imprint looked as if one side of the face had been pressed hard against the printer scanner and the other side of the face was also slightly visible. The mouth was slightly open. Wrinkles covered the entire face. The first thought that flashed through my mind was that it was my grandmother. I told my mother that my grandmother was probably curious, she was probably looking under the window looking for you, that's where the imprint remained. Then my mother takes a towel and wipes this face. And then she turns away in horror, takes my hand and runs into the kitchen with me and says, "It won't wash off." She repeated this 2 more times. We had holy water in the kitchen. My mother gave me a jar of it and we went back into the hall. There she sprayed her on the window and said something, probably some kind of prayer, then wet the towel with holy water and tried to wipe it again. Didn't work. Then she wet it again and opened the window. And wiped that face with the fucking backside of fucking. 4th floor. 4th floor and that's how it is. Then we just sat in the kitchen, she smoked, I just sat in shock. And then it somehow began to be forgotten. That's all. For me, the most terrible thing in this story has always been and remains that it actually happened. Okay, I'll go bury them at the crossroads today. Right next to the cemetery there's a dirt road with a crossroads. By the way, my dad recently went on vacation, to the sea, and then to Siberia to visit grandma, so the nightmares stopped that same day. At least he finally started getting enough sleep. Here's what's interesting though, when I wrote this paste, the very next day my father called me for the first time, and immediately asked questions like how are you, how's work, how's my sister, why isn't she answering my calls? A coincidence, probably, but an interesting coincidence. He's apparently been sitting on Dvach, the old rascal has completely gone downhill without female affection. And my mother came by today and took all the icons, saying that she needed them more. By the way, when I was a child, my sister said that she saw some small shaggy green man who was crawling under the table in the kitchen at night, and then turned into a Christmas tree, and when she turned away, he disappeared. Everyone really wrote it off as a child's fantasy, but do brownies live in brick Soviet barns? They sent me to hell, I'll rewrite it here. A bird with a shitty message. I'm generally a skeptic, but somewhere in the fall of last year, maybe even in the summer, in August, a feathered bastard fucked himself into a window. I didn't pay attention. I told my mom that all these signs are nonsense and you shouldn't believe in such things at all. After 3 days, maybe 4, the bastard fucked again, and so much so that she left a mark. Apparently she got a good run. She didn't break the glass, but I woke up from the impact. Naturally, I thought that one projectile doesn't fall in the same place twice. Out of curiosity, I googled what kind of sign this was. Well, there was nothing good there, of course. I closed the tab and forgot about the sign. The fact that the creature fucked herself twice did not give me peace. My mother is something like the head of the entrance. When the management company calls for a meeting, etc., she is there and keeps the keys to the attic. Well, I decided to climb into the attic, hoping to see the reason for the dive into my window. I did not find either a nest or chicks, and besides, I stepped on a nail. I returned home and hammered in the bolt. And 2 days later the following happened. My mother's brother was run over by a train. To death, of course, by the way, not suicide. In general, I did not go into details. I saw her brother twice in the neighborhood, and when he came to the funeral of my grandmother, i.e. his mother. Then the guy, I would not say that he was from the neighboring house, but he lived in the house nearby. He was a fairly good friend of my mother's brother, with whom he communicated quite well for several years, but at that time I was swimming in dad's eggs. So, the next day after the death, this guy comes to us and says that he dreamed of my mom's brother and asks for a number to talk to him, saying they haven't seen each other for a long time. And they haven't seen each other for a very long time. Well, and then you understand what they told him. Another coincidence is that my mom's brother's wife died in the same way, getting hit by a train. Of course, I think that all this is a coincidence, but sometimes such crap sits in my head that sometimes I think how so many events could come together in one place, and this concerns me, my family. It's like winning the lottery. True, the prize is not the best. I told you about it in /b/in the swamp thread once. I was picking mushrooms in a swamp in the Vologda region. I was in an open place among rare rotten fir trees, visibility to the horizon. I bent down to cut a flywheel mushroom, and at that very moment I heard a stomp right behind me, as if a horse had rushed past half a meter away. By the way, there were hummocks with water everywhere, and a stomp simply could not physically happen on such soil. I straightened up abruptly and turned around, no one and nothing. It could have been an elk, probably, but only a special one, invisible and leaving no traces. I was very scared then, stopped looking for mushrooms and went to the village to be on the safe side. Later I learned about such a thing as a kelpie, but I still think there is a rational explanation for what I saw. I also met a bird in those same swamps that sings like a baby cries. It sat in front of me and cried. I laid 2 tons of bricks at that moment. The bird was calling me somewhere, like some kind of honey expert. It flew away, landed nearby and cried again. I crossed after it 3 times, then the thought came to me, what the fuck am I doing, and I ran home from this bird, only my heels sparkling. There is a video on YouTube, bird cries with a child's voice, so, that bird was different, but cried exactly the same. Listen if you are interested. I asked the locals, no one had ever heard of such a miracle. Anyway, it was 2013. I live on the 3rd floor, my window overlooks the balcony, which is only accessible from the next room. The door to the balcony is usually open to air out the apartment, because it's fucking stuffy. I was home alone then, peacefully capturing data from my cell phone in bed at night. The lights were off, except for the desk lamp in the room I was in. Anyway, I'm sitting there, and then someone knocks on my window. To say that I shit myself is to say nothing. It sounded like someone knocked on the glass 3 to 4 times. I look out the window, and there's just darkness, you can't even see the balcony. I was sitting there guessing who it was, freaking out at what was happening. Also, I have a dog that sleeps in the next room, and after about 20 seconds she started barking somewhere towards the balcony door, as if someone had come out of there. Then her barking slowly began to move towards the door of my room. I looked at the closed door with my eyes wide open, where my dog was barking, but in the end nothing else happened, and in the morning I didn't find anything new. Sometimes I also hear someone moving forks and spoons in the kitchen when there is some uneaten food there. Last night I went to the flea market to take a piss, and somehow my gaze fell on the kitchen, and there was a bench there to sit at the table opposite the doorway. Anyway, I look, and it was as if someone was sitting there, some kind of dark spot in the shape of a person. I was shocked and walked into the room at a sporty pace. That's how things are, after all. A creepy thing happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was thinking whether to tell you about it or not, but I will anyway. In short, I was working with a video editor, cutting a video sequence, launched the video and got distracted by something. I hadn't seen the whole video before. The video was playing and I was rummaging through my things and occasionally glancing at the screen. In general, I turned to the screen and there in the video playback window a face was looking at me, black and white, like the entire video stream, by the way, a skinny guy of about 40 years old. In general, the video was playing and the face was like a static frame, a photograph, just looking at me. A second later, the frame changed to another, the same face, but enlarged, zoom in general. And it was also looking at me intently. Another second later, the frame changed again and the face came even closer. I went to the computer to stop or see what moment was in the timeline, and then, as luck would have it, the monitor turned off. I was fiddling around for 10 minutes, it turned off on its own after 10 minutes for me. Another couple of seconds passed before I reached the table, picked up the mouse and the monitor lit up. The video editor was showing a regular video sequence from the movie in general. I rewound a bit and didn't find anything. I watched this place several times and there was just a video without this face, just a movie. In short, I shit a lot of bricks. I don't believe in any otherworldly crap myself, even though I'm crazy about creepiness, but this incident somehow made me feel uneasy. For some reason, I immediately thought that this was not a good thing. True story. Something creepy happened the other day, or maybe not creepy, but bullshit, but I'll throw it in anyway. Pick related for better understanding. I go to bed late, in the early morning, and the day before yesterday at about 4:30 in the morning I stuck my head out the window to smoke. I'm standing there, smoking, and I hear someone walking from the distant house along the path, marked with a red arrow on the peak. Well, he's walking and who cares, who knows who's stomping off to work in the morning. So I'm smoking, the snow is crunching, but there's no one there, as if a fucking invisible man is stomping around. Well, I was blown away by this shit. At first I thought that the acoustics are fucking awesome at night, maybe the dude is somewhere else, on the school field or the parking lot, and I started looking for him. The lighting there is good, the lights are on along the path, in the parking lot too, so in winter you can see everything far away, right up to the highway beyond the fields. Well, fuck, I turned my head and naturally didn't see anyone. Meanwhile, the footsteps are getting closer, it becomes absolutely clear that this shit is walking along the path, it reaches the middle and walks in place for about 10 seconds. I'm slowly freaking out about this situation, coughing up some salazin, and then the nekkh apparently notices me and leaves the path. It's fucking around in the snow, and there are no tracks to be seen. I'm even more freaked out, throw away my cigarette, close the window and draw the curtains. Then I listen to the nekkh walking under the windows for a couple more minutes. I live on the 3rd floor, by the way. Naturally, I tried to look out from behind the curtain, but didn't see anyone. Then the footsteps died down, and not moved away, but fell silent. I freaked out a little more and went to bed. I slept fine, the popo baba didn't come, so I decided to forget about this crap for now. Also, one observation, the number of steps didn't match the speed of movement. It sounded like normal steps of an adult, but it was approaching incredibly slowly. I wouldn't tell you this shit, I would write it off as a glitch, but the next night, yesterday, another suspicious shit happened. So, last night, also at 4:30, I stick my head out to have a smoke and again, fucking, I hear footsteps. But this time I immediately de-anonymized their author. A guy is running along the road for cars, blue arrow at the peak. A guy with a belly, with a purse over his shoulder and in non-sports clothes, so a runner is excluded. He runs, it is obvious that he is panicking, constantly looking back, coughing as he goes and puffing, that is, it is clear that he is running away from someone, but from whom, it is not clear, there are no pursuers in sight. The guy eventually disappeared from view, I peered through the window for a couple more minutes, didn't find anything, finished smoking and went to bed. That's the kind of shit that happened. Of course, it's possible that these events are not connected. Today I'll keep watch, getting out to smoke more often. Well, I don't know. My mom, dad, and I moved into a new apartment. They both work until the evening, and I, a 6-year-old brat, sit at home alone and freak out. The living room and hallway have linoleum. These footsteps start in the hallway. I'm wary, reading a book of fairy tales syllable by syllable while sitting at the table. These footsteps slaps go back and forth along the hallway, gradually approaching the living room. I feel uneasy. Then the steps speed up and, heading in my direction, very soon stop next to me. All paralyzed with fear, I try to get up from the chair. With wooden movements I start walking toward the bedroom, realizing that there is carpet there, so that at least I don't hear this creepiness. And these steps, immediately after I start walking, also start slowly creeping behind me. In the middle of the living room I break into a run, the steps also rapidly speed up. Having run to the bedroom door, I immediately slam it and turn on the TV, loudly turning up the volume. I complained about this to my parents, who, calming me down and smiling, said that it seemed to me that the partitions were thin and that the neighbors upstairs were walking, and the sound was heard in our apartment, that all children and they, too, in childhood thought different things, which they could not understand and explain, etc. This never happened with my parents. This was repeated almost every day, and these wet steps slapped right behind me, wherever I went, so I preferred to spend time in the bedroom or in the kitchen, because that's where the carpet and doors were. And I held it in or moved to the toilet in short dashes. At this time, I sometimes went to the girl neighbor upstairs, and their apartment did not have linoleum or surfaces capable of making such a sound when walking. My dad and mom immediately became friends with the neighbors downstairs. We often went to visit them. There were no such floor coverings in their apartment either. The neighboring apartment on the side was empty, no one lived in it. Such footsteps continued constantly, and when I got tired of sitting in the bedroom all the time, I began to walk on the linoleum on purpose, hearing the footsteps pursuing me. I walked and walked, walked and walked. I tried to start a conversation with this NYOH, but she did not make any contact. When I really got brave, I would pick up a hanger or a baseboard. My parents had not yet finished the repairs, and, turning sharply and unexpectedly, hit the air behind me, but this also did not affect anything. This happened every day except for weekends, dying down in the evening, when my parents were home. I stopped paying attention to it, completely forgot about it. And about 6 months later it all suddenly stopped. But sometimes, or rather rarely, at night on the balcony I could hear the whispers of two unknown people. It was as if they were telling each other some stories. My bed was near the window separating the balcony from the hall, and this whisper was almost opposite the head of my bed. At first I piled up so many bricks that they silently fell off the bed, and then, remembering how harmless the previous nekh was to me, I began to get up, look through the window at the balcony, try to quietly, so that my parents wouldn't hear from the bedroom, swear at this creepy thing, ask her to leave and not disturb my sleep. As soon as I got up on the bed, the whispering stopped, and as soon as I lay down again and covered myself, it started again, and after that these two giggled, openly mocking me. It was not often, but it was still annoying. I did not tell my parents anything, as last time I gave a damn, falling asleep to this whisper, no longer paying attention to it. Many more isolated incidents happened in this apartment. Once I clearly saw two ghosts, turning around and going to bed. Maybe I imagined it because of the intense heat and stuffiness. Now I am 27, since the age of 23 I do not believe in anything mystical, but I still cannot explain this crap. I am also always haunted by the numbers 13, 666 and 34. 34 seems to mean nothing, but I explain the abundance of the other two numbers in my life by probability, grinning when I saw them again. I also grinned when I received a diploma with the number 666, and an hour later on the bus I received a ticket 113666, and the next day on the same bus I took a ticket 666013, remembering that I lived half my life in entrance number 13. This is not pasta, I just wrote it myself, having come across this story. I am sure that mysticism is bullshit. Everything in life can be explained, you just don't always know all the facts with which this can be done. I usually sit on read only, decided to make a story. When I was little, I still believed in religion and other bullshit, cock. In general I was very timid, I was even afraid to go to the toilet at night. I walked around mirrors in the evenings. When I was scared, I said words out loud, which, as my religion claimed, turned the gaze of the Creator on you, from which all evil spirits ran away in fear. After I said them, I felt a little better. So, at 13, I ate shrimp at night. I heard that if you eat them at night, you will have very scary dreams, but it seemed to me that this was nonsense. I went to bed, fell asleep, and total fuck began. I had dreams within dreams within dreams, one creepier than the other. I woke up in my bed and saw a black nex with red eyes, who was looking at me. I tried to pronounce this word, but my lips could not move. Then I suddenly wake up again, only this time this crap is even closer. Then again it drags me into some kind of dream in which I do not remember anything. In general I fucked up that night. But the most important thing is that I forgot this word, I just could not remember it. I tried practically the whole year periodically to remember how it sounds, but nothing. Then I asked my granny, she said, LOL. Such things. I am not afraid of necks, because I don't give a shit about them. Sometimes I dream that I am friends with a ghost girl. She waits for me after 8 p.m. and we talk and hug. Sad. I'm sharing my own stories and those I've heard. I changed my religion at 17 and am now a Tibetan Buddhist. Why? I was baptized, but when I was taken to temples, my hair would burn, like I was standing next to a candlestick and it would catch fire. It seemed like nothing special, but in my memory, no one else's hair had ever burned, and more than once. I felt sick from the stuffiness. I was attacked by a hellish yawn. A friend of hers told me a story about an acquaintance of hers. He was offered a bet to spend 45 minutes in a cemetery at night, not to hang around there, but just to sit in the alley, on a bench. His friends stayed behind the gate to wait for him. 45 minutes passed, then an hour, 2, 3. They waited for him for 3 hours, and he was gone. They thought maybe he had quietly moved home, or he had decided to lie in wait for them and play a prank on them. They entered the cemetery. The boy is lying on that very bench. At first we thought he fell asleep, but no, he died. Heart attack. Now stories from my experience. I do a little witchcraft. Firstly, 2 years ago my great-grandmother became seriously ill. She was 98 years old, and although she was a very strong and lively old lady, she worked in the garden. This time something went wrong, she became seriously ill. I decided to pray for her at night, like, if she is destined to recover and live a little longer, let her recover soon. And if her time has already passed, let her die soon, so that she does not suffer anymore. The next morning I wake up from the phone, my great-grandmother died in her sleep. I do not tell anyone in the family the story. By the way, she was a witch, although you cannot tell. Like, an Orthodox witch. I understood this because she had cards and secretly told fortunes. There were some strange knots and amulets hidden in secret. She often did protective rituals on us while my brother and I were little and did not understand anything. She spoke something, like a house for protection, very often. She was from a village, maybe she was taught it there. Remembering that witches must pass on their gift, and you must touch her hand, I took her hand at the funeral. An eerie feeling. I don't know if the gift was passed on or not, but I have always told fortunes well. And the last thing, it was recently. I did a ritual, fed the spirits so that they would help. There you had to take one precaution so that they could not attack you at that moment, while you are feeding them, and I did not do it. It was at night. 2 hours later I was taken to the hospital with a heart attack, and my heart is healthy. They pumped it out, I went home. There is also a story about how one sorcerer bewitched the family of a stockbroker, a cynical bitch with cocaine and whores, just like in The Wolf of Wall Street, and now he is pumping money out of them. But this is a murky story. I request hypotheses about what it was. I don't believe in paranormal activity, except for something natural and logical, just not yet discovered by science. As for aliens, well, we exist, maybe they developed somewhere, the world is big, but it's unlikely that they are rustling around here right here. So explain better, could my brain do something like this? So, it happened about 17 years ago, respectively, I was about 13. Winter, evening, but not yet late, I am alone in a dark room and lying on the couch, looking at my curtained window and thinking about something of my own. The window is not tightly curtained, there is a small gap. Second floor, outside the windows not far from the building hangs a lantern above the entrance to the building, so it is not very dark in the window. The window and the transom are closed, respectively, no sounds from the window, unless they are loud, are heard. Suddenly I see through this crack, as from top to bottom, gradually, slowly, something light green, the color is just like fireworks at night or like electronic green glowing watches, pictured. I am not scared, because I think that these are fireworks, they are so silent that they just float. Then it dawns on me that this green zone is too big and solid, well, like a large unfolded scarf or a blanket falling, and fireworks are still point, they are not such a glowing solid zone. But still, it is not scary. I think to get up and go to the window, but I understand that I will not have time, because everything glowing will already fall. All of the above happens in 1 to 2 seconds, and I am lazy, lol, because I decide that these were fireworks. But then I begin to think that such fireworks do not exist. And at that time, something like that was rarely done in our yard, except for New Year, and this was not New Year or any time close to it. So, Anons, your versions. In all the years that passed, nothing more inexplicable happened.